As we get more and more into whiskey, we tend to overaccumulate a wee bit. We overaccumulate bottles of malt, bottles of blends, bourbons, whatever whiskey we're into. We just, through pure exploration and curiosity, we tend to have more than we can drink. Inevitably, that means that we've got this litter of half-opened bottles, or perhaps bottles that really have very, very little left in the bottom. And it gets to the inevitable point where somebody asks, how long will this last for? How long before this whiskey spoils or it's no longer drinkable? Well, I've always had my own opinions on this kind of thing, and you've got all your opinions too. But tonight, I'm going to do it in a kind of semi-practical sense. I've got a wee collection of bottles here that are all very near death, and I'm going to go through them and share with you why I've picked them out and when we should be killing them off. I'll see you all in a second. Hello, whiskey folk. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Thursday. Welcome to the vPub. Hope you're all doing very well. It's nice to see you all again. This topic for me has been one that's been on the wee list of topics for a long time, but it was something that I thought I could weave into other kind of, let's say, small, insignificant topics. I didn't think originally that it was the type of topic that I would want to dedicate an entire Thursday night vPub session towards. At what point do we get rid of our whiskey? How long does it last? What kind of whiskies last longer than others? All of these things. But then I realized that if we were going to talk about that and we were going to contextualize it, if we were going to caveat it, if we were going to say that it's a wee bit more complex than just giving a best before date, then it would probably deserve a wee bit more exploration. I haven't done any research in advance of tonight, so the bottles that I share, my reaction to them will be, hopefully you'll be able to tell whether I'm pleasantly surprised or whether I'm shocked or whether I feel that it's different. So before I go into the whiskies, hopefully I'm mindful enough to tell you what I'm expecting and vocalize that first, and then pour into the glass and try and share with you what I'm experiencing in the glass. We're going to go from relatively recently opened whiskies with just a little bit left in the bottom for a wee while. We're going to focus on Dregs tonight. We're going to talk about fill levels and things like that, of course, but generally we're going to the extreme. We're focusing on the whiskey when it's down at really at the heels. But we're going to talk about things that have been opened relatively recently, medium term, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, that kind of thing. But right at the end of tonight, I've saved a bottle till the very end that I can tell you not only has it been open since 2009, but for probably a decade, it's had this much left in the bottom of the bottle. It's appeared on the vPub before, and you might know what it is already, but I'll share that with everyone right at the end, and I'll obviously pour a wee glass of it and see what we should be doing with that wee bottle. I feel sorry for it now, but there's a wee bit of nostalgia and things involved with it, and it's like any bottle of whiskey. When I do have to kill it off, I tend to always feel a wee bit sad. Anyway, sorry. Welcome, everyone. I hope you're doing well. I hope you've poured a dram. I hope you've got your feet up, whether you're picking this up live. Welcome. It's fantastic to have you here. Or if you're picking this up on the replay. Cheers, everyone, and welcome. How are you all doing? See, quite a few of you in already. I think before we go on, talking about everything, I'll jump in and do what I always do and welcome some of you beautiful whiskey folk and dedicated barflies. If you're trying to get my attention as usual, just type aquavitae. Make sure you've got the spelling right. That V, that second, that where there should be a U in aqua, right? There's a V. Yeah, But if I see Aquavitae, it's in orange, and it usually prompts me to pay a wee bit more attention to those comments. I'll scroll back up a bit, where my pal Brian has bought me a wee dram from Michigan. He's saying, greetings from Michigan, Roy. How are you, Brian? I'm fantastic. All the better for having you in here, buddy. Thank you very much for the dram. And welcome, Brian. Cheers. Whiskey Uncorked is in here tonight. I wonder if that is Brian. I wonder if that's the same. Whiskey Uncorked has joined he signed up to be a member of the Aquavitae Barflies. So also Danny Hebbington celebrating being a member of the Barflies for 36 months, 3-year anniversary, Danny. Thank you. Eric Cunliffe celebrating being a member for 43 months. Eric, so good to have you in, buddy. Eric in Canada and Danny just up the road, a wee bit northeast of me. And what these guys are all doing together is that they've joined the YouTube membership. On desktop or Android, you can do it. You can't do it on Apple iOS devices. Obviously, you have to be on desktop. Apple doesn't like you spending money through anybody other than them, right? And what you do is you keep all the ads completely absent from all the Aquavitae content. I never go to Google for ad revenue. The Barflies, you guys, as members of the channel, make sure that it stays ad-free, and I don't need to. In return from me, you get a wee set of channel-themed emojis, Glen Cairns and ass hat emojis, and just wee kind of fun in-jokes and things like that. And of course, your wee Barfly loyalty badge as well. More than anything, I appreciate it. Thank you all for the support. And nice to have you in, Whiskey Uncorked, Brian, Danny Hebbington, and Eric Cunliffe. Luna Aaron is here. Good to see you, Luna. She's saying she's really tired, but just waiting to see Roy and y'all's really quickly and then off to bed. Well, it's awfully nice, Luna. Hope you pick it up in the replay. And I hope when you do, if you're back here now, you're feeling nice and refreshed. Nice to have you in, Luna. Falsgraf Klaus, my pal also from Germany. He's saying, my last dreg was a 40-year-old grain I shared with the person who gave it to me. It was gone after 6 months as a dreg. Too old, or because we sipped it at an altitude over 1,000 meters above the sea? Aye, that would... and I think we don't need to sweat too much about the science behind this. Whiskey enjoyment is viscerally, objectively... very, and it's to be celebrated for the fact that it's utterly subjective, right? It's objectively subjective. We are in this because we love it. We love talking about it. We love the shared moments. We love the individual moments that will often be no similar to any other moments, even if the bottle is the same. So this is all just kind of loose and relaxed. Nothing too serious. We don't need to get too uptight about these things. Jimmy Legg is in. He's saying, I'm killing off a classic tonight, Roy. Aquavitae and Aaron 14. Hello, everyone. And Aaron 14, my goodness. I suspect that when my last bottle of Aaron 14 get close to the bottom, I probably hung on to it a bit longer than I otherwise would have. Why? Well, because we know it's going to be difficult to replace, right? So let me take the brightness down on the screen a wee bit here. But nice to have you in, Jimmy. Hellswood is here too, saying, evening, Roy. Good to see you, Helen. I hope you and Andy are doing very well. It's wonderful to have you in. Sugar Kitty is here. Fantastic. Thanks for looking after us as always. My moderators, Helen and Sugar Kitty. Jean Kelly saying, greetings, Roy Aquavitae and fellow Barflies. Got to duck out in a few minutes to get basketball game at my alma mater, but we'll catch up on the replay. Good luck to all on the quiz at the end. And good luck to you, Jean, when you do make it back and play a wee bit of a quiz at the end. Like last week when we focused on Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy distilleries, there is a wee theme to the quiz at the end this week. Rick Johnson is here. Good afternoon from San Francisco, Roy, and fellow Barflies, and Happy New Year to one and all. Good to have you in, Rick. Hope you're keeping well out in the West Coast, San Francisco. Papa Q saying good afternoon from sunny Nebraska. Papa Q, Nebraska. Wow, I'm not even sure I could name a town in Nebraska. I should be blushing as I admit that, but I think it might be true. Nice to have you. Major Nut is saying good evening, Aquavitae, Barflies and Whiskey Geeks. Just popping out to say hello and catching it all in the replay. Thank you very much for picking it up on the replay, everyone that is. And it's nice to welcome you back, Major Nut. Whiskey Weekend Ram, that's Harrow. He's saying, I had my too long opened bottle this week, so he's already finished it off. So you're being quite disciplined, are you, Harrow? Good to have you in. That's Whiskey Weekend Ram. Danny Hebbington there. Just as it dropped, I think it was the comment I picked up earlier, Danny. I hope it was just as it jumped there. And Andy Pierce is saying, I kept the heel of the pre-Royal Warrant Lefroy 10 that got me into whiskey 20 years ago. I tried it recently and the magic was gone. I will keep the last of that bottle as a memento. A wee bit of pragmatism there. So what has happened is he's had that for 20 years, and with that wee tiny heel in the bottom, it's finally disappeared. But that's quite a lot to expect out of a Dreg, isn't it? I don't know how you would have felt if you'd poured it off and decanted it into a wee sample bottle, and then maybe poured it back into the big bottle just as a wee pouring ceremony or something. But 20 years is a lot to expect, I think. Simon Jones is saying, please can you give a shout out to barfly Callum Muir, who got married recently on Iona. Simon Jones, I absolutely can. It'd be a pleasure for me to give a wee shout out of congratulations to barfly and pal Callum Muir and say, magic. Great news. Congratulations, Callum, and to your wife too. Cheers. On the island of Iona as well. Very cool. Mike Molasses saying, good evening, Roy, Aquavita and Barflies. Good to have you in, Mike. And Arnie Tiger is saying, no, they just jumped, please. How far do I have to go up and catch Arnie? So just a quick one. It's a problem, he's saying, when there's so much new to try. This is my focus tonight. We can be as disciplined as we want to be. We can have our own kind of wee regimen and whatever habits that we've developed over time to take care and look after our whiskies. And some of us are very, very good at that. Others are just so scattergun, like we just want to try everything, that you end up one day realizing, but not only have you got a lot of bottles and you've got problems with space and everything like that, but you've got more complex problems where you don't have the capacity to finish everything off yourself. And you have to start adding in some layers of discipline, unless you're willing to just sacrifice it and let it go and see what happens, which you won't be surprised to hear has actually been my strategy. Brian M is saying, Omaha is in Nebraska. There we go, Brian. Thank you so much. And Rob Smith is saying, hello from sunny St. Louis. Good to have you in, Rob. I hope you're keeping well. Brian Stormont is saying, looking forward to this, celebrating 2 years as a barfly. Hey, Brian, thank you very much for your support, my friend. 2 years is something indeed. Craig Willis is saying, evening, Roy. I look forward to meeting you and some other barflies in person on Monday at the Bon Accord. It's sold out now. I've got a reserve list just in case, obviously, there's some dropouts and things like that and people that can't make it. So if you are in Glasgow on Monday, that's this coming Monday the 20th, I'm hosting a tasting at the Bon Accord in North Street along with the Thompson brothers from 7 till 7:30. It's 25 quid. We should have 6-7 more nice drams on a Monday night, but it's going to be great to hear the stories and share some of the information and wee bit of behind the scenes, hopefully, from what's happening up at the Thompson Brothers in Dornoch as well. Hosting alongside with me will be Simon Thompson and Distiller Dan. Phil was due to join, but he's got a very, very good reason for not being there on Monday night. I think it's still going to be a fantastic tasting, despite being January, despite being on a Monday night in Glasgow. I know it's not easy for a lot of you, but there's a lot of people making an effort to come up and travel for it. I'm looking forward to it. And it'd be nice to see you there as well, Craig. Look forward to it. James in Sweden is saying, evening, Aquavita, always a pleasure. Sticking around as long as possible tonight. Got a few dregs to take care of soon, but they're still dregs because they're not favourites. No. Ooh, I would put it to you that a lot of my, in fact, the bottle I'm going to probably hold up first is dregs because I'm so precious. I just don't want to see it off because when it's gone, it's gone. Well, just like every barfly who comes to Scotland have 3 drams. Okay, you probably need staff for that, but you'd get rid of a good amount. Aye, but it's not always about getting rid of. As I've just said, there are things that I want to keep, and that's part of the problem about the dregs as well. Doodle the Dram is saying, aggravating you lovely barflies. Just sitting in the car after picking up a mystery lunch for tomorrow from Denise and Peter. Now off home to see how the dregs of my Ardna cast strength are keeping. Get home safe. Get your feet up, pour yourself one of those wee Ardna Murchins, and I'll see you soon, Arnie. It's wonderful to have you in. Tom Franey, celebrating being a member of the Barflies for 18 months. Tom, thank you so much, buddy. Thanks for your support. Is this vPub a prelude to a recycled review? I knew that somebody would ask, Tom. Yes, of course, by definition, it's before the next recycle review. Is it an immediate or an instant prelude? Possible, but no promises. Thanks, Tom. Good to have you in. Dave Evans is saying, got a Springbank Burgundy open for about 4 years. Aye, celebrating being a member for 57 months, David. Thank you for your support, buddy. But Springbank Burgundy for 4 years, I think that would be fine, especially if it's a higher ABV one. Green Malt James is saying, that said, I have had a tiny amount of my Imperial left waiting for the right moment. Again, that's one of the precious things. Have a wee look at this. In my glass tonight, I've got, well, I'll get to that in a second. It's actually pretty good. It's not going to win any prizes, but it's very drinkable whiskey. And if people were coming to the house, I would have no shame in pouring them a wee dram of this and letting them enjoy it before I shared the fact that what I've actually given them a glass of is from my slowly building back up again, my Dregs jar here. This is just one of these kind of demijohn things with a wee tap on it. It's not leaked yet. It's quite a good wee tap on this. And so if I'm doing a tasting and I get a flight of maybe 5 or 6 drams for the tasting, I'm only going to be pouring half of them typically, especially if it's a school night for the tasting. And then you end up with just lots and lots of not just sample bottles, but half open, half empty sample bottles. So unless it's something very specific or special, I'll tend to tip the rest of them into this. There will be some bottle dregs and things like that if I'm just trying to clear a space. If one of the shelves are just kind of, it's far too many bottles with just a little left in it, I'll tip it in here. And various other bits and pieces will go in here. The only rules I have is that it has to be whiskey. I don't care about age or style or category or definition or anything, as long as it's whiskey, as long as it's grain spirit that goes into this, and as long as it's not from a glass, right? It's not long as this is not a spittoon, okay? This is intended to be something that stays pure enough to be enjoyed and sipped in the future. I did have fun with this over the years, but it's just leveled up quite a bit because as I fill this up, I take it out and I pour it into the recycled cask that's building and sleeping away in the background. So there's always a place for this whiskey to go, as long as it's whiskey and it's in good shape. Dorpass Whiskies bought us a dram to say, last 2 inches of the Barfly's 12 and 14-year-old Loch Lomond bottles. The 14 is just sublime, and the 12 is a first full bourbon bomb. Michael Henry, Keeper of the Quaich. I did actually get awarded with Keeper of the Quaich towards the end of last year, I think, October time. And it was nice to see him getting that recognition. I'm glad and interested that you feel the same as me, that 14 is sublime. It's so subtle compared to the blast of the 12-year-old that I think this 14 can often feel a little bit too quiet. It's when you give the 14-year-old time on its own, that's when it starts to shine. I wonder if you've ever mixed a wee tablespoon of both in the same glass. It's great fun. Jimmy Legacy saying, I have a large sample of something labelled as Recycle Cask Project. What is that? That's exactly what that is, Jimmy. I gave you that from the cask that's currently maturing on site at Aquaviti HQ, and that is basically dregs, half bottles, me just clearing out space. And instead of it going into an infinity solution like that demijohn or some of the infinity bottles that sit behind me and staying in glass, that's it going back into cask. It's never going to be something I can sell or trade or do anything other than have fun with and enjoy myself and drink with friends. But the real magic of that recycled cask is that it's going back into a good quality wood. So all of the kind of hodgepodge mega soup of whiskies is going into that. It's just going to be interesting. I'm not expecting anything from it, but that's what that is. And you have one of the very few first original samples. It's very peaty, Jimmy, currently at this stage. And Brian M is saying, I was hoping that this vPub was a sign of an imminent recycled review. So that's him chiming in as well. Like Tom Franey was. Warner, I'm on it, Brian. The One Glass Man Warner in the States is saying, hi, Ryan, fellow barflies. Just finished my classic laddie review for YouTube. It's great to be here. Sorry, I'm a bit late. Posting reviews, not as easy as it looks. Cheers. Absolutely right, especially the pre-recorded things. A lot of agonizing goes into that. You've got to edit yourself and everything, Warner. I know what it's like, but everyone check out Warner One Glass Man reviews on YouTube there. There's another channel I want to give a wee shout out to as well. David Hong has bought my wee dram. David in the States. You never say anything, David, but it's nice to have you here always. And thank you very much once more for your dram. Thanks to Brian. Thanks to Jimmy. Thanks to Warner, the One Glass Man. Cheers, everyone. Nice to have the drams coming in for New Year. I've got this link here, a channel that I've actually started to quite enjoy, really quite soothing, contemplative, from, I think it's Brian at Whiskey Uncorked. And I'm just going to pop it in the chat here and encourage you. I don't know where he's sitting on subscribers right now, 661 subs. I think they deserve a wee bit more than that. Quite thoughtful, based in the US, Scotch focused, very much Scotch focused. And I'll try and pin that to the top as well, in the hope that, you know, once you see channels have been going quite a wee while and they're grinding it out, and once you can see that they're serious and they're into the community, they're not there just to kind of stir up controversy and be, I don't know, awkward about things. I think that it's nice to just give it a wee bit of support. Today on YouTube, it's brutally difficult. It was never easy, but back when I started out, there was maybe only 2-3 dozen channels or something. These days, we're into the hundreds, and that's just when I'm speaking about specifically whiskey content. There's so many channels that I can't keep up, and I'm constantly uncovering new channels. That said, the stuff that I like and the stuff that I enjoy myself, if you don't mind, occasionally, I'll share it with you guys. Brian over at Whiskey Uncorked and his brother, I'm enjoying their content. So there's a wee link there for you to give them a wee click and a subscribe if you can. Where's Roy in Norway saying good evening, Barfleys and Roy? I poured myself a wee 9-year-old peated Glentalkers by Providence. Bottle's been open for at least 15 years, and I'm on theme tonight. Roy, that's because you've been into whiskey for a while. McAllen and Rare Doc's in here tonight. Good to see you, Doc. How you keeping, buddy? I suspect that you're more disciplined, but you're very disciplined in how many bottles that you have open. But people that have been into whiskey a long time, like Roy over Meer in Norway, like Doc in Germany, they have accumulated bottles that if they are not disciplined, it's inevitable that they have whiskey that's been open for a long time. So we're going to talk about a few things tonight: how long whiskey lasts in and of itself, and how long whiskey lasts as the level goes down. And tonight's content is very much going to be focused on as the level goes down, and when it gets to that critical point when it's near the bottom, that's when we start to refer to as the heels or the dregs. Good, wonderful to have you all. Hellswood has dropped in a wee link there as well for Warner's channel, One Glass Man. But with Warner being in tonight, you can just click on the One Glass Man and on his name, and you'll be taken to his channel as well. Good stuff. Let's get a wee move on there. I'm actually quite enjoying this. It's fairly nondescript, but it's tasty. It's quite sweet. It's quite a lick of peat in there as well. All sorts of sherry and wine and everything will be mixed into this. I don't mean literally sherry and wine. I'm talking about ex-sherry casks and ex-wine casks that's been used to mature whiskey. Somebody pointed out I need to be a wee bit more careful with that. We can't talk about just sherry and sherried wine and things like this. We have to talk about cask. And I think that that's right. Look at this bottle. This is Dregs. We're in the Dregs now. But this is quite special. This is something that I am not in a hurry to part with, because when is the next time I'm going to be able to get my hands on something as precious as a bottle of 35-year-old Brora? This was for my 50th, a gift to myself. I accumulated enough money over the generosity around me at my 50th that I was able to buy this. And then in 2022, which was a couple of years after my 50th, I took it to Isla and opened it with friends in our accommodation over there on Isla. And it went down very well, and it's been going down very well since. But if we just look at what's left in the bottom of this bottle, you're probably speaking about 150, 200 pounds worth of whiskey, just in that, and just in the dregs in the bottom here, maybe even more. I'm not sure these days how much this is worth. But because this is being consumed and it's not going to be made or be available again, it's just going to continue to increase in cost for me to replace it. So what should I be doing here? Should I be decanting this into a smaller glass? Probably. If I was going to be keeping this for much more, maybe another year or two or whatever, I should maybe be doing that. And it's arguable that I should actually have already done so. But I just love the idea that I have this still sitting on the shelf, and I don't think I'm ready to quite part with that yet. So there's dregs that we hang on to because we don't want to say goodbye. And I think for me and what I do in the channel, because I want to have a lot of whiskies around, reference points and things like that, that probably happens more to me than most. And then there are other dregs that are just sitting around simply because we just haven't got around to doing the right thing and finishing them off yet. Here's a bottle of Kuboken here that I'll be sharing with you a wee bit later. And I have lots and lots of bottles around the vPub here with these kind of small levels in it that really have to have a decision made around them. So tonight I'm going to take you through a few different categories. That's the precious one out of the way. But then if we go on to talk about antique whiskies, and I know that that's a clumsy word, but antique whiskies, I want to separate the idea from old whiskey because that's conflated with it being mature. But antique's old in the sense that it's been in glass a long time. This is a bottle that's been bottled way in the past. The whiskey's been distilled, of course, way in the past. But it doesn't legally age in glass. Of course it doesn't. But whiskey remains a chemical soup and it does change in glass. How long can we reasonably hold on to antique whiskies? And I've got one or two examples to share with you about the trials and tribulations of picking up and exploring these really old antique bottles. Then I'm going to take a very small dreg of a low ABV whiskey, or I'm going to compare Bright and Fresh, let's say, Bright and Fresh whiskies that's relatively new, that's been in dregs, and then something that's mature, something that's quite old whiskey, but purchased quite recently. So it's not an antique, it's just an old mature whiskey that's only got some dregs in it as well. So young versus old. How fragile is the older whiskey versus something that's much younger? And then I'm going to talk about low ABV versus higher ABV whiskies. And I'm going to talk about the fact that nothing is ever lost. With these low ABV and high ABVs, there's often a wee solution that you can put together in order to maybe not revive or restore something that might be coming close to being lost, but something that you can bring it back to being a little bit more vibrant and alive again. It's kind of Ralphie type experimentation I'm talking about there, right? And then heavily peated and heavily sherried. Am I staying in focus tonight, by the way? Heavily peated and heavily sherried. A lot of people talk about those being the ones that's most affected by being left as dregs or open bottle for too long. Sherry starts to lose its spice and its vibrance and its definition. And peated whiskies, smoky whiskies, start to lose the impact of the peat smoke. So we'll play a wee bit with that tonight. And finally, we'll talk about, as I teased already, the idea that we push it to an extreme. A bottle that's been around for so long, I ought to be a wee bit embarrassed when I share it with you tonight. Mirko is here celebrating being a barfly for 12 months. Looking forward to meeting many of you at Glasgow Whisky Festival 2025. Fantastic that you're coming over for it, Mirko. No tickets or anything on sale yet. That will usually come out about Easter time. Sells out instantly. Please keep your eyes on the best place to go would be the Facebook page for Glasgow Whisky Festival to get your tickets for that event. We tend to go to the early session, which is a 12 o'clock session. Finally done celebrating being a member for 13 months, and even fellow barflies, past a year, how time flies. It really does fly. Barflies. Rico Denert is Whiskey and Saxony celebrating being a member for over 4 years, 49 months. Rico, thank you so much, buddy. Happy New Year, everyone. Happy New Year to you too, Rico, and thank you for your support. And Donner Pass Whiskey, it's brought me a dram to say, recent tasting notes on the Blood Tub. Love to hear. That's something for a future vPub. Thank you very much, Tim. Thanks, Rico. Finally done, and Mirko, cheers. I've got 7 glasses in front of me, this one and another 6. But I'm going to be pouring really, really quite small drams tonight. And I've got a couple of extra glasses because I may be doing a wee bit of a comparison. Let's get into the next one. So if we want to cover this idea of antique bottles first, when I talk about antique bottles, I'm talking about this. Look at this old branding of Highland Park. Now, this has appeared on the vPub in the past for various projects and reasons and things like that. I've got these antique bottles for a very specific reason to share with you. This Deanston is a 17-year-old Deanston. This was actually a bottle that came from cousin Kevin. This is a new cork. We're fortunate that the cork fits this because the cork disintegrated when we opened this one, like so many of them do. We had to strain it and decant it and get it back in again. But this bottle has been around for a long, long time, this Deanston. It's 40% ABV, 17 years old, and we think that this 17-year-old goes back to the early 2000s. And this Highland Park is of a similar vintage. Both of these are undrinkable, or let's say they are close to undrinkable. I keep both of these on hand as examples of what to look out for very, very specific things that I'm about to get onto. This is the exact opposite of that. This is supremely drinkable. This is a bottle of Annock, one of the original bottles of Annock 12-year-old. This goes back probably a similar vintage to the Highland Park and the Deanston that I've just held up and shared with you here. 40% ABV, which is still the same ABV of Annock's 12-year-old today. But this has been around for a while. I bought this from auction and Italian date stamp and things on it, as so many of these antique bottles tend to have. Still got the original cork here, you can see. I don't know if it's going to be able to focus on that just about. You can see the original Annock cork on the top. It's a very pretty thing. It's quite attractive texture to the paper, really old school design and things. It's not just called Knock, it does actually say Annock, but the Annock is very, very small text at the script at the top there. Wee thistle design and things, and a little image of a cottage. It's maybe an old image of the distillery, I don't know. Distilled and matured in Scotland by the Knockdhu Distillery Company, Banffshire, bottled in Scotland. I opened this for a tasting in 2019, February 2019. So this is knocking on for 6 years old. Now, it didn't get opened and then sucked down to there. There was a lot of people at this tasting, and it ended up being really close to the bottom when I took it home. So this bottle of Annock has been low in this bottle for 6 years. There's been a lot of air in this. This is an antique, fragile, delicate whiskey. It's at 40% ABV as well. This is the absolute worst way I could be treating this whiskey, is just to leave it on the shelf and forget about it as I have. This bottle has been over my shoulder in the backdrop of the vPub, probably for the majority of its life since it came back from that tasting. So I have sipped this since. I don't have much recollection other than the fact I know I haven't got any recollection of it being bad or going soft or flat or odd in any way. So let's just pour a wee drop. No glug, because the level in the bottle is so low. And the reason I'm pouring a wee drop tonight is not because I'm being precious about it or anything. Obviously, I might have to be sipping quite a few whiskies tonight. A wee sip of a wee nose of the cork. And it smells absolutely fresh. I mean, it does look a wee bit dark and things, but that cork to me kind of looks in not too bad shape. Some people like to pick up the bottles and just kind of gently keep the corks wet, just kind of roll the bottle, dampen the cork. I know that pubs, gantries and things, whiskey bars, some people, some bar managers and things like that to be part of the practice, take the bottle down, give it a dust, a polish, wet the cork, put it back up again. I remember doing that when I had 60 bottles on hand, but when I'm well into the many, many hundreds, that becomes a wee bit of admin. So if I told you that that was something that I practiced, I'd be fibbing. But let's see how we are after 6 years of abuse for this wee bottle of delicate Speyside malt. On the nose, it's very reminiscent of what I remember it being, that gorgeous tropical slightly grassy element. It still smells fresh and bright to me. There is a wee bit of something that would hint age. You're going to hear me talking probably throughout tonight about things like kind of the damp book type nose that you sometimes get. But this isn't like cardboardy or off. This is a wee bit more like a dunnage note. This is a positive thing. This is a nice thing. This has been a beautiful wee bottle of whiskey to have. Really, really quite nice. Forgotten how nice it was. I'm expecting this to sip nicely too. Am I going to be surprised? Cheers, everyone. 6 years and after 20 years in glass and 12 years in wood, it's quite a wee life, this whiskey. Cheers. There are no controls here. I don't have a sample of this. It would be nice to have the foresight to pour a wee 3cl would have been enough, a wee sample of it when it was opened fresh, so that I could open it now and sip it alongside this one that's been in the bottle for a while. I would be lying if I told you that this bottle hasn't changed, but I would also be lying if I told you that it absolutely has changed. The truth is, I can't be sure, and let me tell you that's a very positive thing, because it means that this is still consistent with my memory of how this bottle was when I first opened it. It's super elegant, very tropical, very light, but also still demonstrably malt whiskey. Even at 40%, it's still got a nice mouthfeel to it. And there are not enough kind of old, dank notes kicking around in here for me to consider in any way that this has been spoiled. In fact, it is so soft and tropical and fruity that it's just elegant and lovely. It would be nigh on impossible to buy something today that tastes like this for the money I spent on this. I think I picked this up for £35 at auction. Going from memory there, I might be wrong, but I think it was really, really quite inexpensive. No one's looking for antique bottles of Anok, right? That's the glass gone. That's the glass gone. Lovely whiskey. Maybe not something that you would want to be drinking all night, every night, all of the time, but there's worse things to have if it was only going to be one whiskey around. This is good, solid, still stable, fresh whiskey despite my abuse. Well done, Anok. Well done, this wee bottle. However, I can't say the same for the Highland Park that I shared with you and the Deanston. And here's when we get to the kind of caveat that's going to run through this entire vPub tonight. How we store these whiskies. I showed you there in the Anok that you've still got the original intact cork in place. This Deanston, we had to replace the cork on it. We've got a nice tight fitting cork in there now. I think this looks like a Klein leash cork or something that fits it nicely because it absolutely disintegrated. So we were nervous immediately that this would be corked. I'm just going to pour a tiny teaspoon, in fact, half a teaspoon into that Anok glass of this Deanston. I really don't want to drink this, and I'll tell you why in a second. Sour, overripe off apples. A little bit like baby food, you know, the apple puree baby food. But behind it, there's also a mashed sweet potato, mashed turnip, vegetal, half-boiled potato type note. 40% ABV, but it's thin. There's a watery texture to it as well. This is not me knocking Deanster in any way. I'm confident that when this whiskey was fresh and new, this would have been beautiful. But what we've got here is a contaminated whiskey. There's still some flavours in here. There's things to pick out. As I noticed there's a wee bit in the finish. There's a bit of a confectionery sweetness there, kind of refreshers, chalky sweets, that kind of chalky confectionery. There is some nice things potentially still here, but the overall sense of this, although it could be that it's been tempered over time in the open bottle, it could be that it's dissipated a little bit, that the off notes that it picked up while it was corked has dissipated a wee bit, but it's still there, especially on the back of the annock. It's just not great. And I suspect I'm going to have, this is the second, no, it's actually original cork. You can see what I've just done there. So this is what the problem that we have, not for the first time that this has happened on the vPub. It happened when I opened a Lafroig, you'll remember, with John Campbell back in the day. It was an antique Lafroig. This original Highland Park cork is now just broken. So these things, these natural cork seals, closures, they're not like the glass. They're not even as close to be as robust as the liquid itself. They are the weakest part in the whole package. So this theme that I'm going to talk to you about running through all of these bottles tonight is how have they been stored? If they're your whiskies and you've had them for decades, you can answer that. Under no other conditions, even if you buy it from a reputable retailer, can you answer that question? You don't know the history of the bottle or how it's been stored. This has been stored in the vPub since it was old. I've had this probably at least a decade now, this bottle of Highland Park. I bought it at auction. It's been in the vPub for that time, but you can see that just sitting there on the shelf, the cork has naturally degraded to the point I'm now going to have to go and get a corkscrew, filter paper, decant. The reason I was going to have a wee sip of that tonight, that is also contaminated. It's corked. It's something has happened to that bottle. The way it's been stored, the place that it's been stored, the temperature, the light pollution, whatever it is, something has happened to that bottle in its life that's made the whiskey taste very, very difficult to enjoy. It's so much to do with storage. Regardless of how much liquid is in the bottle, the annock I've just shared with you has had that much in it for 6 years and it tastes every bit as bright and fresh as I can remember it being. Whereas the Highland Park and the Deanston, they've both been open for a few years. The Highland Park's been open for close to a decade. The Deanston maybe only 4 or 5 years, but they were stored as full bottles. So the question is not how long whiskey can last, but how long does it last depending on the storage. In a cool room temperature, low light scenario, away from heat sources, away from bright light sources, stored upright, of course. It's really as long as we're alive, I would argue, if it's looked after. Longer. I've sipped a whiskey that was distilled in 1882. 1882. Bottled in 1884, bottled in 1905 as a 21-year-old blended malt. It was called Hoy, poured for me by Angus MacRailed. 1882 distillate, and it was bright and fresh and fruity. I suspect that particular bottle, where we were fortunate enough to all be able to try that at the Old and Rare Festival in Glasgow, because it had been stored well by people who cared. Not so for these two bottles here. So antique whiskies are a very specific thing. Antique whiskies, when we talk about how long whiskey lasts, I think that not only do you have to be careful when you store them and how much is left in the bottle, the theory goes, although I don't feel like it's been proved tonight because of how good that annock is, The theory goes that these are delicate whiskies that can go flat and lose their life and their vibrance quite quickly. Not so sure. Okay, let's look at two, let's call them semi-precious bottles, okay? And I'm holding these in front of you tonight for two very, very different things. Sorry, I'm missing quite a bit of orange there. Arnie is saying, Aquaviti, is that the same HP you had in a vPub blind challenge before? I also had the 18-year-old version of that. But when I was speaking to you, Arnie, you can see that there's a green dot on the back. So that would tell me that I have indeed used that in a blind challenge in the past. But I also had an 18-year-old version of the exact same that was really fresh and tasty and quite nice. So it might be that that's what I've used in the past. Although maybe I've shown you the wrong one, because I do think I have two of these wee Highland Park 12s. So it could be that I'm getting that confused with the one that was horrible. Anyway, I'm using it as a prop tonight, and I can't drink it because I've broken the cork on it. So the point stands. Lucas is saying, had I been a 12 that was corked? Oh, and he's got a wee sick emoji there. So you know, Lucas, what it tastes like, and it's not good. Is that whiskey bad? The worst Roy can say is that's difficult to enjoy. Well, it's right. There's still a kind of taste of whiskey to it. I remember I had a particularly badly corked Klein Leash, quite an expensive Klein Leash from the 1990s. And I took it up to Andrew Symington at Edredare when the shop was open. And he came along and he just nosed it and immediately knew what was wrong with it. And he replaced it on the spot, despite the fact I had not bought it from him. Whiskey with Molly Ben is saying, okay, that's the Traitors uncloaked, finished. So good evening, Whiskey folk and Aquaviti. Okay, you've got yourself addicted to a wee TV show there, The Traitors. I've not been watching it, Ben, but I think my wife has, and a few other people have been watching it. I hope you enjoy it, and it's nice to welcome you into the vPub. I've many bottles that are stored longer than they were in the cask, says Hoyt, and I think you're not alone, Hoyt. There's going to be a lot of people like that. I suspect that a lot of the bottles I'm just about to share with you would be bottles that could end up like that, but these are needing taken care of. So we're going to look at young and fresh versus old and delicate. Now, what do I mean by young and fresh? I'm talking about something that's really low in the level, but this is a relatively recently opened bottle of whiskey, and the malt itself is young, quite strong, plenty ABV in there, keeping it together just to see how it stacks up. We've got a bottle of Loch Lomond, but not just any bottle of Loch Lomond. Some of you might spot the wee barfly and realise that this is the 2022 release that I did of First Fill Bourbon at 54.9% ABV. A lot of people swear that this is the best bottle that I've released so far. I understand why. It was just such a really, really good bottle of whiskey. And once this is gone, I think I've got one bottle left of this. And it's gone. It's just gone. So you can understand why I'm being quite precious about this and why I'm holding on to it. But again, we've got the same problem that I've got with the Brora and various other bottles as well. This is not a way to look after whiskey. So I'm going to have a wee sip of this and see, with such a vibrant, fruity, effervescent, fizzy whiskey, has it lost any of its edge? Has it gone a wee bit flat in the 2.5 to 3 years that it's been open? Then, similar ABV, similar style of whiskey from a bourbon cask. This is more likely a refill bourbon cask. This is actually a bottle of Glenburgie, but this is 27 years old. Not much difference in ABV. This is 51.6. This is 54.9. A few points of ABV, but this has been similarly. This has been open for about, I think, late 2023. I bought this, so maybe about 18 months. Something of that order, maybe a bit less than 18 months. That's been like this. And the reason I know that it's been down that is because I took this to an event in Edinburgh, and we opened it at the event, and it was just passed around and everybody got to have a wee sip of it. So I brought it home with very, very little left in the bottom. So these things are bottles that have been stored for quite a while at a low level. Let's pour a wee teeny bit of this Loch Lomond first. and tell you all whether those of you that are similar to me in nursing the last few drops of your aquavitae barflies Loch Lomond on the nose, it's not lost anything. Hellswood is saying about the same in our bottle too. Still our favourite of the three. Still did it full of fizz and flavour. This is nosing, like kind of bright sweet lemon bonbons, limoncello, clean, fresh, crisp green apples. So you see where I'm going with my tasting notes here. Not only ex-bourbon leaning, but very much Loch Lomond, straight neck pot stills, Chardonnay yeast. Beautifully fruity and bright whiskey. On the palate, wow, lots of that pop and fizz. Leans a wee bit towards lemon oil. There's a sweetness to it, lovely sweetness, confectionery lemon sweetness. Fits quite nicely with a kind of warm limoncello. Pear, apple, bright orchard. Full of life, full of vibrance. Like I said, I would be lying to you if I said that this has not lost anything, but I would also be lying to you if I was to suggest that it has lost something. There's no control here again. I don't know. I'm not going to open my fresh bottle and compare it because it's just about to become even more precious to me. Beautiful, gorgeous, and I'm going to go so far as to say quite unique Scotch whiskey. I don't think, if this has lost anything, let me try and quantify it. If this has lost anything of its original brightness and vibrance, I would suggest it's in the single-digit percentage points. If that matters to you, you might want to take care of this, decant it into a sample bottle, keep the empty bottle for posterity or get rid of it as you prefer. But if that doesn't matter to you and 5 or 10% is acceptable risk to you, don't sweat it. Keep the thing on the shelf like this, as long as you're storing it well. While I talk about that, I want to talk about the neck pour. If we talk about whiskey changing and being careful about how we look after it, we're talking about the same kind of things happening as with a neck pour. If I talk about that first fresh pour from a freshly opened bottle of whiskey and you pour it into the glass, you should really be giving it a bit of time to settle and all of these great things. And we often talk about how the neck pour, we can't really judge the whiskey until it comes down, maybe beat to the shoulder, until the whiskey's been open a little while. And these are silly concepts, things that are difficult to explain with any kind of science or understanding that I'm aware of at least. But it doesn't matter, because if we feel it, we feel it. If we taste it, we taste it. If it's there, it's there. And no amount of science or friendship or trusted friends could tell you otherwise. You have to go on what you sense and what you feel yourself. So I'm always careful to not fully judge a whiskey until I've had 2 or 3 whiskies out of the bottle, till it starts to go beyond the shoulder, most of the time. And it all kind of plays a part in it. It's very much the philosophy behind the recycled reviews that, you know, the first sip is going to be a wee bit different to the last sip and that type of thing. That's not what we're here to debate tonight. What we're here to talk about tonight is how long can we hang on to, how long should we hang on to bottles like this. So let's put that wee Loch Lomond, it's only that left in it, let's just get rid of it, eh? I'm enjoying it much more than I would have otherwise reasonably expected to. And we'll try this 27-year-old Speyside of this Glenburgie. This is a North Star bottle, by the way. Obscurities and Curiosities. It was a limited series from those guys. Some really quite interesting bottles came out. I was drawn to this Not inexpensive. It was quite pricey being a 27-year-old, but it was very fairly priced for its age and provenance. This wee Glenburgie. I was quite keen to get hold of this, a fan of Glenburgie. Rarer seen Speyside whisky. There isn't an official bottling, of course, that we see very often, and any that has been released from Pernod Ricard has been pretty lazy on the presentation too. I think they did release a Glenburgie as part of their Ballantine single malt series, didn't they? Let's have a wee nose of this. My memory of this was you wouldn't call it a sparkler for 27 years old in my memory, but it was a good, solid refill bourbon style single malt Scotch whisky. I think it was a small batch. I'm not sure if it was a single cask. Let's see. I don't think there's any details of cask on this. 51.6% ABV. Distilled at Glenburgie Distillery, 27 years old. So here we go. So the smell of old whiskey is here. Fantastic. Such a nice contrast against the Loch Lomond. But there's no sense. Bear in mind, this has only been open very low level for about a year, 18 months. So we're starting softly. There's nothing on the nose that suggests this has gone flat. There's lovely old school fruits in here. Like slightly sweet, overripe grapes. A little bit winey. But lots of green. Edging towards a tropical nature. Not quite there. Sweet pear, certainly. And a kind of sweet, almost suggestive of a grittiness, like an icing sugar, sherbet type note. Elegant. 51.6, noses like it's 43. Cheers, everyone. 27 years old, eh? Much softer than the Loch Lomond, of course. A few degrees ABV lower, but actually tastes much lower. You would sip this and think you're sipping 46% or less, no question. That's to do with the age. It's much more winey on the palate. That grapey thing is prevalent here. Sweet grapes over ripe grapes, definitely. Almost like a cognac type vibe to it, a brandy type vibe. Really sweet old grapey notes. Lovely floral elements on the finish. Let's go for another sip and try and get some of those sweet confectionery notes that we're nosing. Now I know why I've not been finishing these off. These are treats. These are wonderful things. That's incredible. That's as much as I've enjoyed that whiskey. That wee sip, the couple of sips there, I've enjoyed it more than I can remember in the past. I suspect where some of the bright apple orchard stuff has quietened down a little bit, maybe in the open bottle, and it's let some of the kind of thicker, slower, heavier fruits, let's say, become more obvious. That kind of sweet grape note is something that's leaning almost towards like a brandy cognac type note. Ridiculously long finish, and it goes floral. There's kind of a vague idea of a kind of milky chocolate thing hanging around at the end. But there's also a kind of floral element, a rose water type thing. That is as much as I have ever enjoyed it. And I'll put it to you that if this whiskey has changed, you wouldn't get an argument from me at all. I would go further than that and say if this is the most confident I've been that the whiskey has changed in the open bottle like this. But I am also confident that it's changed, maybe for the better. Now, it's not going to taste like it was when it was fresh, right? When it was new, when it was uncorked, the way it was put together. It's different, and there can be no guarantee of that difference when you finally get down to it. Can be no guarantee that the whiskey that you buy at 27 years old and 51.6% ABV that you leave in a bottle like this, stored nicely and stuff, there's no guarantee that you're going to go back to it a year, 2 years, whatever later, and it's going to have improved in the open bottle. But I suspect, to my palate and to sit in front of you tonight, there is nothing else other than for me to say that this is tasting at least as good as it ever did. It's gone from being a solid Speyside to a delectable Speyside. I'm going to leave it there with the glass in front so don't lose track of it. I'm going through more glasses than I expected tonight, but that's what we're doing. We're only having a wee tablespoon or a teaspoon at a time. Whiskey Uncorked is saying, similar experience for me and my 21-year-old Glenburgie from Single Malts of Scotland, 55.2%, and it's wonderful. Fantastic, Brian. Glenburgie's a treat when you do get a hold of it. Finally, Rand saying, always get a slight burnt orange marmalade note on the end of a Glenburgie. Burnt orange marmalade, not on this one tonight. I wonder if burnt orange or marmalade would be cask note or spirit note. Theoretically, it could be either, right? Michaela Finer Rare is saying, I can sell you my bottle for €500. Doc, you're such a sweetheart. Thank you, big guy. Is he talking about the Glenburgie? Whiskey Weekend Drama is saying those, he's maybe talking about Loch Lomond. Those Ardnamurchan 411 and 413 bottles still kicking around and very alive. Perfect Taro, and I suspect that they should be, given the fact that they're, 7 years old? 7.5 years old or something. 55% ABV as well. They should be robust for quite a few years in an open bottle. And Doodle the Drama Arnie saying the first bottle I killed off was a Coquerin 12. And I had a 15ml mini dram left in the bottom. After about 3 weeks, that sure did turn flat. Would be interesting to measure the ABV in the dregs. Yeah, I wonder how much it is for an instrument to measure ABV. There are silly, easily affordable portable ones. That'd be nice to have. Highland Hamish is saying, I'm sitting on a heel of Gordon MacPhail Glenburgie, 27-year-old. An immense dram. Good for you, Hamish. Fantastic that we've ended up with not only the same distillery, but a similar vintage as well. How's things up in Highlands, Hamish? Good to have you in. All right. Let's move on a wee bit, because we've looked at the kind of more delicate old whiskies open for a year or two, and then the much more young and vibrant whiskies open for a year or two. But how much does ABV play into things? There is a tale, and I'm not going to sip these tonight. I can pass these whiskies. I'm just holding them up to you just to grab them as examples, really. These are two whiskies that I quite enjoy. One's a Madeira finished Linkwood, and you can see I opened this on a vPub, so you can see I'm getting through it. It's past the shoulder now. And I do reach from this from time to time when I'm looking for something that's soft and fruity and sweet, not too high in ABV, maybe a starter dram, or maybe just the couch dram that I'm only going to have one of, and not in the mood for anything stronger. But this is Murray McDavid's Cask Craft. These are chill filtered 44.5% whiskies. But the thing about this, I think I paid £28 for this one. So it's very inexpensive whiskey, delicious to behold. I would say that I was a wee bit cynical about this when it came out because of the lack of chill filtration and things. But they keep it natural colour. They're very honest in everything else, and they're going after newbies, and they're trying to bring in flavour and definition and flavour and things. So they're doing a good job at a decent price. That said, 1.5% more ABV, don't chill filter it, would be my preference with these things, and we don't mind paying £2 or £3 more. 44.5% ABV versus this one here. I don't go particularly high in ABV, but this is one that I enjoy. It's another Speyside here. Muscle Sprouts. I'm trying to remember what this is, but I'm pretty sure 44, Distillery 44 for the Society, I think is Craig Ellichy. I could have made a mistake. I'll let you guys Google and you can let me know whether I'm wrong or not. But I've had this on the shelf for a while, and you can see that there's plenty in this. This is my third bottle of this. This came out in about 2019, 2020, and every time I drained it, while it was still available, I picked up another bottle. This was the bottle that I held in my keep at SMWS in Glasgow for a while, and eventually I bought this to bring it home because it's just a fantastic wee bottle of whiskey. And I would suggest to you that if I compare these two side by side, and if I was to be watching these on my shelf dropping down, I would be much more nervous of this one. This one with all those kind of cask forward Madeira cask flavours and that low ABV. Whereas this Craigellachie here, I think it's Craigellachie. Love the Muscle Sprout, says Peated Frank. I think maybe did you taste some of mine when you were over? Craigellachie indeed, fantastic. This is just from a refill ex-bourbon. There's been no footering going on here. There's been no playfulness with this. This is just pure, honest whiskey left in a refill cask for 15 years. It is the perfect sweet spot for me for whiskey. Sure, it's nicer if it's a wee bit older in a refill cask even, but it's affordable at 15 years old. You go north of 15 years old these days, it becomes not particularly affordable, it becomes much more scarce. This is the perfect sweet spot. And the whiskey, even at 55.6% ABV, especially, you could argue, is very robust and strong and confident and solid. And you have this idea that a bottle like this on your shelf, you can almost be not ambivalent about, you don't just not care, but you can relax about it. Whereas this one, at the lower ABV, reliant on much more cask influence for flavours and less integral spirit, you would maybe be a wee bit nervous about things going flat, left or right of perfect in this one. That I can only give you, and I suspect anyone in this chat can only give you, is anecdotal guidance. The higher the ABV, the less cask fettling that is going on, I think the more robust the whiskey will be. And that stands for something that's been in a particularly active cask, or if something that comes out of a cask with a lot of cask influence, if it's the original cask that it's been in, I suspect that I feel, just from my own cookie trail of whiskey exploration and discovery, I feel a little bit more confident with it. Whereas things that have been put together, things that have been vatted and made and blended and things like that, or things that have been finished, decanted and re-racked into something else and then put on, I think they, in my experience, they tend to be something that's a wee bit more likely to fade a little bit, to soften a little bit. Now, as I've just proved, I think with that Glenburgie, sometimes I think it's okay for things to soften a little bit. It's not always a bad thing. Still waiting on a couple of days to open up my Glenburgie 1995 from Signatory. When I'm turning 30, I'll pop it open, I guess, says Lucas. You'll need to let us know when that is, Lucas, so we can raise a wee glass to celebrate your birthday. And Auderty is here. Good to have you in, Auderty. Occasionally it's Adwerty, isn't it? But it's Auderty. Let's just go with that, regardless of how it's spelt. Having to look up Glenburgie in the Malt Whisky Yearbook, never heard of it. Well, it's the pleasure of the fact of there being 140 distilleries. Nobody can be expected to know, right? Nobody can be expected to know. I just point out to everyone, by the way, that there is a wee link at the top that's pinned, and it's just my pals over at Whiskey Uncorked. Just a wee YouTube channel I was recommending there. I'll leave it up there a wee bit longer before I take it down. Thank you so much. They've already jumped up from 660 to 690 subscribers tonight. I really do appreciate it. A subscription is free, but understand that you want to keep your feed clean and efficient and things like that. I suspect that you might enjoy hanging out and listening to these guys talking about and sharing whiskey. Okay. Pierre is saying, oh, he did. I picked up that one a bit. I'm loving the Muscle Sprouts. Simon Ray is in. Spot on. 44 is Craigellachie. Thank you, Simon. And great to have you in. Hellswood is saying, have that bottle too. Picked one up last October. Cracking dram. Got to love a 44, especially if it's that sweet teenage years refill cask. Justin Wan saying, we need a certain scientist from Dramface. Oh, dear. To participate in this discussion tonight. That's right. But I also want to keep it less scientific. It's the vPub. We need to be able to find ourselves in spaces where we can express and talk about genuine things that we feel and discover, and not need to have scientific explanations we just, the pleasure of whiskey is organoleptic, and it's okay to, if such is your vibe, to take it into understanding down to a molecular level, what is happening there in the glass or whatever. But sometimes I want to fight against it a wee bit and preserve the magic in the moment, and the fact that what I'm discovering tonight is very likely to be very different from what I might discover again tomorrow night. And I don't necessarily want to have it all explained. That said, Justin, I know the guy that you're talking about, and it's fantastic to have his insight. We all tend to soften a wee bit with age and time, says Graham Brown. Good to have you in, buddy. And I'm into that, right? Soften in more senses, in more than one sense. All right, let's move on. We've done low ABV, high ABV. We've done young and bright and fresh versus old and delicate. We've done antique whiskies. Let's talk about what happens when the inevitable is discovered. Something has been lost. We've gone back to our shelf. We've picked up one of our whiskies and we've sipped it and we've gone, oh no, because it does happen. I've never had anything to go off. I've never had anything to go truly off. Famously, there's been a couple of whiskies in the past that have gone flat to the point of not enjoyable. One was famously a Yamazaki, but we got through the last inch or two of that using it as mixed drinks, and it was perfectly delicious. There's been one or two blends in the past that's gone a wee bit weird. But generally speaking, it doesn't matter how long I abuse whiskies, and that might either be proven or disproven tonight. I'd tend not to lose many whiskies, despite the fact that my admin is absolutely terrible. I seem to enjoy them right down to the last dregs. Tasting in Paisley last year for Barflies at Peter Lee's restaurant in Kwangtung. I took along bottles of Milestone whiskies, and we had this Milestone tasting, and some of them were really quite fantastic things to taste and enjoy. There were big hitters there as well. Elijah Craig Barrel Proof, an old one of the Gravestone bottlings, the Tombstone bottling, sorry, one of the 2017 Lagavulin 12 cask strengths, big hitter whiskies. But right in the middle of that tasting, I put a very, very delicate whiskey, I put in the middle against these big hitters a bottle of Anok 16-year-old. It's pure coincidence that I've used Anok as my antique bottle tonight, and it's coincidence that I'm using it as this story because I want to tell you about what's happened to this bottle that's in front of me now. I am in no way using this as an opportunity or a springboard for me to launch into a rant, but how devastated I am that Knockdhu, the international beverage, the owners of Knockdhu Distillery, are bringing back the 16-year-old. Hallelujah. However, good news, bad news scenario. The bad news is they're bringing it back at 43%. They've run up the pitch, they've stood on the ball, they've turned around, faced their own goal, and volleyed it right into the back of their own net. Sorry, I did end up in a rant there, didn't I? This is on the back of the abuse of Speyburns rebrand. What is happening with that company? Who is involved there making these decisions to take this fantastic whiskey, maturing it for these amount of years, and then just making it a complete and utter upside down arse of it? I'll move on because that's a topic for another evening. Let's get back to this tasting in Kwangtung and Paisley. I put this delicate whiskey right in the middle of the lineup because I was confident that having it in between these big, bold bruisers, how gorgeous and subtle and perfumed and floral and tropical and delicious and unique this whiskey is, would stand out. And it worked because out of the 6 or 7 bottles that we enjoyed that night in the tasting, 5 or 6 or 7, this was the dram of the night. To the point that James McGoran, who may or may not still be in here tonight, we've got some pictures of him stealing literally the last dregs of the bottle straight into his enthusiastic wee mouth. It was delicious. And I appealed to everyone not to all charge the auctions at the same time to pick up bottles of it. When I heard it was coming back, I was super excited. I've had a few bottles of these on my shelf over the years. Doc in Germany's managed to source 1 or 2 for me. I've picked it up at auction. and I've tended to stash them here. But a lot of people love this, and a lot of people wanted to get their hands on it, so I've gifted a few over the years. Most recently, I gifted one to Roddy, knowing how much, when I discovered how much he loved Annox 16, he got a nice full bottle from me. I was reassured that I always had a full bottle here, and I had this on the shelf as well. Well, the full bottle went off to the tasting in Paisley, and it was thoroughly enjoyed, but I was reassured when I came back and I poured myself a dram of this, only to discover that this Annox 16 with this amount left in the bottle is flat. Here's my Annox glass from earlier. Let's bring it back. Let's just pour, and I'm going to pour a bigger amount than this than I'm going to sip tonight, and I'm doing it for a very specific reason. This has not gone off. This has not gone bad. This is not filled up with lots of off notes, faults. This has just gone a wee bit saccharine sweet, a wee bit flat. It almost gives me the sense like where you've got this bright, fresh vanilla ice cream, which is a nice tasting note for this whiskey typically. It's like it's been melted. It's been allowed to melt, and you've got that not so nice semi-melted or melted ice cream. A ridiculous note, but I think one that describes what's happened with this very specific bottle of Annox. I was thoroughly enjoying this as it went down, and it's only now that it's down there that I've discovered this. It's kind of lost some of the sweeter, softer notes, the confectionery things, the slightly floral side. There's still a kind of really quite tropical core to things here, but the definition and the detail, that kind of grip and jaggedness, that vibrance, that sense of life in the whiskey has been lost. It's just gone a wee bit flat. Anyway, what I did to recover my situation, not restore, not return it to its original state, no, but to help things out, and I'm grateful of this. And you don't need to have the exact same, you don't need to keep it a single malt. You can keep it the same category, the same style of whiskey. But I've got something here with much higher ABV. I've got a 56.3% Annox 16-year-old. But this is the 125th anniversary edition, which interestingly has also been open, in fact, longer, I believe, than I've had that original 16-year-old open. And what I did the other night is I didn't do 50-50. I basically poured about a tablespoon of the 16-year-old cast strength anniversary edition, which I enjoy less than the original, let it be said. And I just poured a wee drop in on top. I put a wee acrylic cover over the top, gave it a swirl, and I walked away. Later that night, I came back, and like I say, I did not restore. I didn't return to its original condition. But what I did with a higher ABV malt of a very similar specification from the same distillery, doesn't need to be, I was able to instantly bring a lot of that detail and definition back just by amplifying the ABV again, some of the vibrance and strength and robustness of the cast strength whiskey into that 46%er that's probably been allowed to drop down quite a bit below 46 in the open bottle. Vanilla ice cream is a perfect way to talk about this whiskey. Lots of vanilla. Sweet natural vanilla. Floral elements are there. I suspect I could do with pouring a wee bit more of the cast strength in here. The ratio is a wee bit off. That was just a wee teaspoon of the cast strength into quite a lot. But already, just by doing that, I've brought a lot of that life back into the glass. So what do we do there? I have established that this is no longer what it once was. I have admitted to you that I've always enjoyed this, but I never went out to run and buy a replacement bottle for it. This was never as good as the original 16-year-old was. I put it to you that what I should be doing here if I wanted to look after these whiskies a bit longer and sneak my life forward with them a wee bit, what I should be doing is putting half of this into this and leaving it on the side. I'm lucky because, and I don't have a funnel, because if I had a funnel in front of me right now, I would do this in front of you. Nothing's too far from reach, right? It's not the biggest funnel in the world, but let's actually do it, because what I'm doing here is I've still got a bottle of Anox 16. And I'm just going to do it ever so slowly. Not least because of the size of the funnel is very small. And then just leave it on the shelf for a bit. I'm going to put in, as I say, about 50% of the liquid. Now, this is still going to be an Anox 16, even if it's not the original Anox 16 in this bottle. It's still single malt, still Anox 16. I've not changed the specifications on this label whatsoever, but even if I did, even if I took some of that Glenburgie or my own Loch Lomond and put that in there, because it's kind of similar in style, ex-bourbon maturation and things, whoop, what's the big deal? I just make a wee pen marking on the label to remind myself that it's no longer the original liquid, and I've probably got something back on the shelf that is exciting to go back and enjoy once more. Right, we've got the glass is empty again. I think, no, or is that it here? This is it here, isn't it? Right. Okay, I'm not going to sip it alongside it, but we've now got something that I think has been, to some extent, rescued. If you're a purist, if you're much more precious about things, you may choose not to do that. But I've done this with a 16-year-old cask strength, gone into a 16-year-old 46% bottle. I don't think I've lost anything there. I may have even gained something. Nothing is ever lost. You can use it goes into your infinity, receptacle, whatever it is that you've got on the go, a decanter, a bottle, whatever it is you're using. Maybe you're fortunate enough to have a cask. Nothing is ever lost. Our first bottle buy of the year is an Anox, the 9-year-old SMWS Oloroso First Fill Hoggy. Would love to snag a bottle of that sublime 16-year-old. Helen, I think you were there, weren't you, when I shared that one? Ian Williamson is saying, thanks for another great vPub. Roy, early start tomorrow. So we'll catch up on the replay. Really interesting, as I currently have 50 plus open bottles at various levels. Well, let me share with you, Ian, now that you're picking this up on the replay, let me share with you how the community are getting on with their struggles. Bob Sander is saying, resuscitation in a glass or bottle, nice way to give it back a life. Experimentation is always fun. Thank you, Bob. It's nice that goes down okay. Sometimes you get blowback from purists saying that we're trying to be master blenders and all of this whiskey makers and things. No, it's our whiskey. We can play with it. Wow, Pure Alchemy live on the vPub, says Saxo Scott. Good to see you in, Saxo Scott. And Peter Lee is saying, I remember fondly that grain of malt like that Anox 16-year-old at my restaurant. I hope that you did too, Peter. Did you get to try it? I know you'd have been working that night. Graham Fraser is saying, Glenburgie, like Glentalkers, are so underappreciated as single malts by Pernod Ricard. Interestingly, Graham, but by enthusiasts, we absolutely love the stuff. Did all the drama saying saccharine sweet is a horrible note for me. I did the mistake of finishing a dram after brushing my teeth and it turned saccharine indeed. Absolutely vile. Sometimes it's going to happen with the contrast there, but sometimes saccharine sweet can come from, for me, it usually manifests in something that's got probably a bit of colouring in it too, but something that's, 40% whiskey, a mass market whiskey, that's relied a little bit too much on a maybe bourbon cask and been married to be as sweet as possible, a too active bourbon cask. Then bottled at 40%, reliant on a bit of colour added there, and the whole chemistry comes together just to give this big blast of nothing. It's just saccharine, and it's not nice to enjoy. It's suddenly, how many bottles can you have on the shelf that you're going to sacrifices mixer bottles. Whiskey Wings, Mike from Honest to a Malt is saying 250-ish open. I've just about managed to keep them a decent level. I don't even want to think about those corks. That's right. And it's difficult unless you're opening them, unless you're checking, being mindful enough to check on the corks. But let's be honest, it's very, very few that fall apart. I have 800 bottles of whiskey. I broke the 800 bottle mark. I'm trying to get a clear out. I'm trying to discipline things again. I've cleared out a lot of the sealed bottles and got them out of the vPub to give myself more space because there was bottles on the floor and everything. It was becoming unmanageable. But as I was doing the clear out and as I was doing a wee bit of kind of dusting and reorganization and all of that stuff, I'd started to realize how many bottles I had suffering from the conditions I'm discussing with you tonight, which is what prompted me to bring that topic on the vPub list of topics forward and to do it sooner rather than later. To motivate me to do things about it as much as you guys, but to first establish where we're at. What I also did was I went out to the community and asked you all where you're at too. Let me do a wee screen share here if I can. Can I do this? I think I can. I only put this out this afternoon. I put it out to patrons. Let's actually see how many respond, because I've left this open. I didn't close it off. 108 people responded, but I took the snapshot at 105. So sorry, 3 of you aren't counted in this list. It's still running in the background now. If you want, I can leave it open. But I was asking my patrons this afternoon if they wanted to feedback, to talk about how they are treating their bottles, to talk about you know, what percentage open do you have? What do you have in terms of, are you worried about your collection? What state's it in? What you're going to do about it? That was the purpose of the poll. So I'll try and share that with you now to let you see what state the community is in at large. Now, I think that this is, it's very much about us. This isn't everybody that drinks whiskey, right? This is very much about us and the people that come to the side of the vPub and things like that. So this is based on 105 of you participating in this poll. Thank you very much for that. It means a lot to me. But I asked a couple of questions, and the first one was how many you have open. I didn't want a number on this. We do that for the Oswas. We do various things, but I wanted to understand the scale of your collection and your anxiety about it. And I asked it along the lines of describe the best option to describe your open bottles. Specifically, I said to select the best option to describe your open bottle collection at the moment. Now, I'm going to make this a wee bit more visual and easy for everyone to see, but at 57% there, that was when I took that snapshot. It might have changed with the actual numbers, but I'll share them with you here just now. The people that were kind of not bothered, that they were quite relaxed, and they were saying that, you know, most of my collection is fresh and pretty full. We're talking about open bottles here, remember. That made up 11% of the respondents. Nah, they're not bothered. Let's put them in the not bothered category. Next up was people saying, look, it's mixed, but I do try to manage my low levels. And they were by far the majority. That was that huge red section that you saw in the wee pie chart earlier there, 57%. Say that they are actually bothered. These people are, they do care, and they are trying to manage, or they're mindful. It's on their mind when they have low levels. People that don't pay much attention to the low levels and decided that it was quite mixed was, for me, a remarkably big number. That 25%, you could mix them in with that blue 11% there. These are people that are relaxed, quite pragmatic. They don't really care too much about it. Then we moved on to people that were made anxious, admitting, I have a lot of low-level bottles and it makes me anxious. They're worried about the low levels. And I have a wee kind of anxiety about that that's added, that hopefully I'm mindful enough to get onto. But they were remarkably small. The people that are actively anxious was only 2% anyway. Then people that said, look, I have got a lot of low-level bottles and I don't mind it too much. So again, we're lumping this in with the orange and the blue. These are people that are not bothered. And they were 5%, and then at the end we've got people, the people that were, they had various other ways of describing their collection that didn't fit perfectly into my category, but again it's 1%. So what we can do is summarize this here and say that of that, the amber, the blue at the top and the purple at the bottom there, that should add up to somewhere in the order of, that doesn't look right. I don't know if I've worked out my maths there, but 59% suggested they were bothered and 41% not bothered. So 25, that's 36, and 5 is 41. No, it does add up. So the maths is okay. 41% are not very anxious about it at all, whereas 59% are thinking about this. And that makes sense to me because I get a lot of people asking, what do I do with all these open bottles of whiskey? How long are these going to stay fresh and enjoyable? So that was the next thing that I asked. Rather than just me telling you what I do, I went out to the community and say, look, guys, what are you doing? Now, we had myriad responses here. And I have taken some feedback from you that I'm going to share with you tonight. But generally speaking, what we'll try and do is summarize this into two pools of people. People that are anxious to do something and people that are not really anxious to do anything about it at all. Again, it was 104 responses when I took this snapshot for this one. It's probably up at 107, 108 now. But I'll make it a bit more visual to answer the question when I said, which of these options best describes the actions you take to deal with low levels in your bottles? First up was people saying, look, I see that they're low and I polish them off. So that is people that care. They see that they're low and they take action and they do something about it. That was huge, 30%. Then you had people that said, I decant them into another smaller bottle or container as an archive. 14%. So again, this is people that's taking action. They care. They see the low level and they're doing something about it. People that saying that they decant them into an infinity bottle or take care of it in a home blend. Now, maybe they care a wee bit less. These are people that are not really interested in the singular experience anymore. A bit like me, quite happy to sacrifice a lot of their whiskey into these whatever what may happen type infinity blends. Home blends, however you want to call them. Then the people start to become a lot more relaxed. They just ignore them until it's naturally their turn, until they happen across them. That was 23%, quite a big number there, laid back. Also people saying, look, I lose whiskies and I pour away what's not drinkable anymore. I was really nervous as to how many people would come back answering that. But if you look here, only 1%. Thank goodness that nobody's chucking it away. As I've just demonstrated you, even if something is lost, there's always something that you can do with it. And then people admitting that they do a mix of the above was a big number as well, 19%. Looking into that 19%, there was much more pragmatism and people being a bit more laid back. And they gave us multiple examples as they did so. And if you were to sort them all into a camp of bothered or not bothered, again, we're probably closer to half and half here. 48% of you are anxious and uptight and take action about this stuff. You do take a step, you do something about it, whereas 52% of you don't seem to care too much. That to me was pretty interesting. So in summary, what we're actually saying here is that half of our community care about this, and the other half don't care at all. Presumably, we've still got a lot of people in the vPub. So presumably you're here because it's the vPub and you're just hanging out. You're not here for any solutions or feedback or whatever. Isn't that just a perfect example, a cross-section of the human condition, the mindset of people, obviously specifically the mindset of whiskey people, but we're as diverse as anyone, right? So there's lots of us that are of the nature to get a wee bit uptight about that. And then there are other people, probably a lot more like me, that's like, nah, I'll get to it. I'll deal with it. Obviously, there are bottles in our collections that I'm nervous about, that I do realize, and they're on my mind. But if I was away from here and I couldn't glance at the shelves and you said, Roy, what bottles are on your shelf that you're anxious about? A 1990s Legic that's over there, Marlborough, one or two others would pop into my mind immediately. A Clynelish, an old Clynelish, an elegant old Clynelish I've got over there, that I would want to contrive design a special moment to take care of them in a memorable way, perhaps, or take an action to do something. But the rest of it, I'm like maybe the majority of you often, is that I'm not that bothered. It's okay. This is whiskey, and it's actually designed to be around for a long time. Tim Dornpass Whiskey saying, I'm all about it. I've 144, 120ml bottle library that archives a lot of variety, and I always have a box of 12 that I'm going through. It's a good way to be, and it suits your mood, your preferences, your personality, your moment, everything. Whiskey with Molly Bennett saying, I don't believe in bottle shock. Happy to open a bottle on date of delivery. Ooh, I have experienced bottle shock, severe bottle shock. So I suspect you'll be happy with it up until the day that you open a bottle and think, that is not good. And 2 days later, you go back and it's sublime. And when you say it's not good, it's a very specific kind of not good. Gary Carew is saying, I say it depends on the whiskey. You might be more reluctant to pour a favourite whiskey into an infinity bottle. I think you're absolutely right, Gary. You're spot on. Danny Hamilton is saying, I care due to shelf space more than the degradation of the liquid. I take stock to free up space. That makes perfect sense. And I know that it's for different reasons, but the end result is the same, right? Saxon Scott is saying, what is the take on vacuum seal? I've never bothered with it. I've never bothered with preserver, the gas wine preserver or anything like that. Can I remind everyone? And I think I can switch the link out now. I've got a link here for the Scotch Test Dummies because they've got an experiment that they run annually. Well, they don't do it every year, to be fair. And I don't think it needs to be done every year. But they've got Macallan 12 at 40%. They get it at 43%, don't they? And Lefroy 10, which I also think they get at 43%. And they bought a few bottles and they opened one years ago, and then they poured some off into a sample, and then they kept one open, and they used wine preserver on some and not on others. And every now and again, they will re-review these whiskies and determine what has changed over time. The open bottles, the open bottle with wine preserver, the sealed bottles, their original controls, whatever it may be. So I'm going to pin that Scotch Test Dummies link now that I've taken down Whiskey Uncorked's channel link, so that you can go over and have a wee look at the most recent, I think it's the most recent video that they did that I could find, where the Scotch Test Dummies, and I won't give you any spoilers or their conclusions, but you can go and have a wee look at what they're finding out about the Macallan 12 and the Lefroy 10. I once donated the dregs of a Highland Park cast strength to be used as solvent for a chemical reaction. I'm a research chemist, and it worked well. So okay, a Highland Park cast strength. Did you donate the dregs because it was poor? If it's the official Highland Park cast strength, none of them have been that poor to my palate or memory. In fact, the most recent one I've got is pretty good. Black Fenny saying, I've also encountered bottle shock, stuff that's quite bitter and odd on the day of arrival, but sorts itself out after just a couple of days. Yeah, bitter is one way of describing it, but I would say fractured. Weirdly, a jaggy, spicy whiskey and watery at the same time. And these were very, very special bottles I'm speaking about that really kind of gave me a fright. Yeah, I left them for a couple of days and they were fantastic. Whiskey Weekend Drama saying that was a great experiment. Aquavitae. Always point people to this experiment. I think they stopped it. They've stopped with it now. Have they stopped it now? Is that the last one that they did? The one that I've just linked? I think that they could keep it going a wee while longer. Scott and Bart. I think that they should do that. All right, let's move on to. Well, I've got two more things to share with you. One's a significant thing, and that's talking about peat and heavily sherried. And then, as a wee kind of anecdote at the end, we're going to have a wee experiment with something that I've really pushed it to the extreme with. Okay. We're at 1:38. Let's clip through this quickly. Let's go with sherry first. Now, I know what you're going to say, Roy. These are everything that you're sharing with us is peated. And I know. And it just, the whiskies that I wanted to pick up off the shelf tonight, any kind of dregs, sherry dregs that were there, there wasn't anything that was particularly unpeated that I wanted to share. This is Kuboken, which is very, very lightly peated. There's not a lot of smoke in this. This is their 15-year-old. This is the original bottle that came out, which to my mind is still the best one. 15-year-old, 15 years. This is not finished whiskey. 15 years matured in Oloroso sherry casks. This is not a finished whiskey. This is not vatted or married or anything. Of course, it is vatted, married, but all of the vattings, all of the casks used were fully matured Oloroso casks. Likewise on this Longrow 18. Now on this Longrow 18, we've got a much, much higher peating level, of course, and we've got a vatting of whiskies, a vatting of different cask types and styles. But what we have here is nothing that's been finished. It hasn't been re-racked and put into some cask for a finishing period. So the robustness and the structure of this, I feel quite confident about. Again, very, very low levels. And finally, we have a fully sherried expression from Kilchoman. Yeah, I'm trying to remember which this year is, but I know I can go from memory. I know exactly what year this is, 2020, and I can tell you the story of this one. Sherry cask matured. So there, again, this is fully matured in sherry casks from Kilchoman. So heavily peated, pretty heavily peated and lightly peated. What connects these all together is that, with the exception of the Longrow, which isn't exclusively sherry, but the style is quite sherry forward. What draws these all together is we've got that peat and sherry mix. Some people, anecdotally, will share with you that the whiskies that they feel degrade or diminish, that dim most, will be peated whiskies and sherried whiskies. So I have these three tonight. I need to keep one clean glass for the very last bottle tonight. So let's do what we can with these. I'm going to pour, let's not, this 18-year-old was the first year of the Oswas, which is 2021. So I think that's our, maybe not newest, but fairly new. This is 2020. This has been open since, and it's had a very, very low level in it since then. I bought this on Islay when we went over there for a family holiday during the COVID year. The window of lockdown opened up enough for us to take a holiday. We booked some accommodation and managed to escape to Islay while nothing was open. But we were on Islay on the outdoors, and my wife and I sat on a blanket on Mahir Bay Beach with this bottle that we'd picked up at the distillery, and we opened it and sipped it while the kids played in the sea in October. I kid you not. Let's see how this wee bottle of Kilchoman has fared in the 4.5 years since. Just pour a wee tablespoon of it. This was very vibrant, very full-on peaty Kilchoman whiskey. And let's pour it alongside what we expect to be much milder peat from the Kuboken. I'll be honest with you, this Kuboken didn't give up much in the way of peat to me when this was fresh and brand new, and I expect more of the same tonight. This was a gorgeous whiskey. This was full-on, flavoursome, spiced, sweet, dried fruits. There was elegance here. You know, the peat didn't manifest, but what did come across was a slightly savoury element that I loved. So let's go on with the Kuboken first. My memory is pretty bright on this one, and see how it comes across after being in that bottle for 3 years at a very low level. 3 years or 2? 2.5, I think. Let's go. Maybe just 2 years on the Kuboken. Okay, I'm going to cover over that Kilchoman because I'm smelling smoke. I'm smelling, okay, I've not had much in the way of smoke tonight. I think the only smoky whiskey I've had is from the one I opened with, from my Infinity Demijohn here. There's quite a few smoky whiskies in this, but since then I've not had a lot of smoky whiskies. But this Kuboken has got a smoky element to this. It's even, you would even go a wee bit kind of pork, barbecue type. Marinade, smoke notes, smoked pork, smoked bacon, smoked hams, that type of thing. I remember this being much more fruity, much more date and fudge and thick. But it's clearly, there's smoke here tonight. Wow. You know how much I suffer from peat blight, so the smoke can be lost on me, but it's here. But it is adding a more kind of savoury lick to things. It's not ashen, it's not sooty, it's not maritime, it's It's like a warmth, a fireside type smoke. Soft. Oh, very soft. Wow, softer than I ever remember. The ABV on this is decent. I think it was 48 or 50% ABV. I would sip this now and suggest 43, much softer. Remember that when there's so much air in the bottle, so much space in the bottle, it's not air, it's space we're speaking about here. The alcohol is in that space. Every time we open that and pour it, we're releasing some of that alcohol. It does soften over time. So I guess part of the calculation is how often are you opening the bottle as well. If it's been opened at a tasting and drained all the way down to there and then kept at that condition sealed with a good cork seal, a good integrity seal, then there's an argument that there's probably not a lot happened. But if you've taken a wee nip, a wee nip, a wee nip, a wee nip, a wee nip all the way down like this, it could get a wee bit softer quicker, which I suspect is true of this one. Just anecdotal, I'm just throwing darts here. This is as soft as I ever remember it being. Still delicious, still gorgeous. This is getting finished. I don't remember this being that kind of honey glazed maple syrup element to it. I don't remember that being part of it, but it's certainly part of it now. A softer, sweeter, more syrupy edge to this. Whereas my memory of it is much more dried fruit, tobacco, leaf, cigar box, cedarwood, that type of spiced sherry. Wonderfully soft. I've covered over that wee Kilchoman. Now the Kilchoman is likely to be PX and Oloroso, of course, but my memory from this was quite a dry, wood-spiced, sherry, heavily peated experience from their Loch Gorman 2020, with a weird kind of burnt toffee caramel, almost slightly medicinal note, like a medicinal lozenge type thing. That's in my memory of this whiskey. I've obviously suggested it to myself, but everything I've just described to you is exactly that. A big punch of, cigar box, cedar, wooden box, tobacco leaf. Really kind of like a pouch of moist tobacco. Red fruit, big red tart fruits, red apple, damsons and plums. Waves of smoke. Not maritime, not medicinal. Fireside, farmhouse, fireside smoke. Farmhouse, I'm talking about Kilchoman, of course. But I want to distinguish between that maritime note. There is a wee bit of soot here. Quite quiet. Inside the whiskey, not sitting on top of the whiskey. Okay, amazing. Noses like nothing has been lost. Tastes infinitely softer. I'm shocked by that. Infinitely softer than it ever has. In my memory, there are no controls here. I don't have a sample from the days when this was full, but this was a big, potent thing. This was quite robust and shouty. It was very expressive. This is very gentle. This is soft. This is elegant. I suspect if we were able to dip in and measure the ABV, this would have been 46 originally. 46, yeah. If I were to measure this ABV now, I think this is certainly dropped. My fault that it has. This whiskey has lost something. But I don't think it is necessarily detrimental. I think this whiskey has, even more so than that Kuboken, it is demonstrably changed, is the word. It is different. A bit of toffee apple, toffee glaze. Still lots of sweetness, but it's much more syrupy than I remember. Very similar to the experience I'm having with the Kuboken. Let's go back to the wee sip, last sip of the Kuboken. They have the same savoury smoke element. I would have expected this to be much more smoky than the Kuboken, but they taste the same. So where this has lost some of its spice, maybe exposing some more of the smoke in the empty bottle, sip by sip as I've opened and closed, gone down. The Cohoman has probably been pretty much, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 drams over the years, been sealed since it was brought back from Islay. And what we have lost here is certainly alcohol, strength, vibrance, ABV, life, smoke potentially. But I think what we've gained is a strange kind of, this is a wee bit more behaved. It's a little bit more approachable. It's a little bit more refined. So what we've got with both of these, the way to summarize both of these peaty sherry whiskies up in very, very different ways, I feel anecdotal, absolutely anecdotal. These whiskies have changed, not insignificantly, but both of these are still beautiful whiskies. They will be demolished in the days ahead because I'm now into these. I'm enjoying these flavors. Look at that, both of them drained. I only poured out a wee small amount, of course, but they're gone. They have absolutely, definitely changed. Let's summarize by saying that there might be some truth in that peat and sherry thing, but not because it's diminishing, because it is morphing, changing. Tom B is saying, not that it was bad. A friend needed something with more alcohol than the 40% whiskey he'd already tried. Ah, okay. Graham Fraser is saying, what's going on with Inverhouse? I know I talked about it, Graham. I don't know if you were in when I had slipped into an accidental Annock rant. Hoyt is saying, just back from my walk. Poured myself a Glengoyne 21 from back when it was good. Oh, Hoyt. Oh, that's a sore one. It seems a little bitter. It's been around for a while then, has it, Hoyt? Jonathan Flowers is saying, I've a long row opened in 2018 and has been at 30% since then, and I'm too scared to try it again. Danny Hebbington is saying, I know, but you need to just try it again. You potentially, Jonathan, you're at the point that you can save it, you can adjust it. You're at the point where you can discover something that's beautiful, right, and enjoy the last 30%. And know that it's whiskey finds you, it's not going to be the last long row that you're going to ever get, right? I know you're out there in the middle of nowhere in the States. It's difficult for us to get long row, but you will have it. Sandy McDonald's, and good to see you, Sandy. Danny Evington is saying, can't get more Scottish than lobbing the bairns in the sea approaching the winter. We asked them not to go in the sea. We told them it would be cold. It didn't stop them. Head to toe, soaking wet, blankets out from the boot of the car, the heating up at full all the way back to the accommodation on Islay. But they laughed and laughed and laughed. Finally, Dunn says, great vPub as always, but 6:30 start means I'll catch the rest on replay tonight. Good night. Oh, finally done. I hope you do pick up the quiz on replay. I'm also quite early in the morning as well. Everyone is saying, whiskey may get soft, but my cousin bought a very old and rare wine. And by the time he poured the 6th glass, it had turned to vinegar. I will take soft over vinegar any day. That's a very good way of looking at it. We need to be grateful of the fact that it is a distilled spirit. Arnie's saying, off to bed, but thank you for the vPub vicarious fun. Looking forward to watching the pour for the showstopper and replay at the normal. Good night, dear barflies. The Mora, he's saying, good night, barflies. Good night, Arnie. And Bob Sander is saying, Kuboken 15 was one of my favourite bottles last year. A truly gorgeous that flies under the radar on my rebuy list. Definitely. Bob, and that one that came out last year was the 2nd edition. The one I've shared with you tonight, the second edition's over there as well. The one I've shared with you tonight was the original. Fantastic. I think I'm suddenly doubting myself now. Anyway, let's do the real big. And I promise you, whatever you see or witness me experiencing in my last clean glass tonight, I've not tasted this in years. I have tasted it over the years, but we're going to push it to the extreme just now. I'm going to share with you a bottle that my brother purchased for me. He bought this and gifted it to me back in 2009. This is the old branding, one of the old styles of branding for the ever popular and much celebrated Leadchick from Tobermory. So you can see that this is completely different. There's no age statement on this. Just says single malt Scotch whisky. Doesn't tell you that it's peated. It's 42% ABV, as you can see there. What a weird ABV to put something out at. Neither meat nor fish. Doesn't matter. It is what it is. They've changed things now. Everything from Leadchick these days tends to be 46.3% ABV minimum or higher, and we love the stuff. We absolutely love it. I have never truly loved this whiskey, but this was to me the definition of right punch in your face peat and young, vibrant alcohol. That's what this was. It was not refined. It was not particularly flavorful in any direction, but if you wanted to demonstrate to somebody what young peaty whiskey tastes like, this was an easy and an inexpensive way of doing this. Back in the day, you could pick this up for about £17. And I know that I've had this bottle since then because it's never been replaced. Over the years, this has been sipped and sipped and sipped until the point, maybe about 10 years ago, it got down to here. Now, this bottle, I had a quick look. I couldn't find when I've shared this bottle with you on the vPub in the past. Hopefully, the facts I'm sharing with you now are consistent with what I've said in the past. But it's the truth, as far as I remember. A golden gem of the Isles, it says on the back. I've never noticed that before. BurnStewartDistillers.com. So this is before Distell took over. This is before CVH Spirits, who are the current owners. This is back before Ian McMillan, Billy Walker, and all of these people that have been involved in the development of the distillery since had anything to say. I don't think Billy Walker had anything to do with Tobermory now that I think about it. Regardless, it is what it is. This has been open since 2009, which is a bottle, the oldest bottle of open whiskey I've got in my collection, with this tiny wee amount in it for probably something approaching 10 years. Let's get it in a clean glass. There's my clean glass. I'll wet the cork and I'll be very careful. Ooh. Okay, the cork came out fine. It's a wee bit of residue, cork residue on the top. Like I say, this bottle's not been open for a long, long time. I'm suddenly suspicious already. Let's go. Old whiskey. Wee tiny dregs. By the way, this whiskey has been left on my shelf for all of that time, with in the back of my mind me knowing that I would be doing something like this with it at some point in the future. Even in the glass, this thing is absolutely clear. It's even paler than Chardonnay. I'm not confident. I was expecting me, if I'm honest, to go back in and say this is young whiskey brash, nothing particularly refined, very peaty, but still tastes fairly similar to how it has in the past. And I was maybe expecting a bit of alcohol lost, but I have to be honest with you, there's something not right on the nose here. From the cork, this is a wee whiff of vegetal. I don't know if it's corked as such. I just know that maybe it's always smelled like that and I'm just more sensitive to it now. It's still smoky, but it's not a blast of smoke that I remember it being. I remember it being quite ashen and sooty. That's not the case, quite soft smoke. Just a puff of smoke. A wee bit of lemon. Everything is quiet. Nothing is particularly alive, spritzy, vibrant. No, everything is soft and quiet. It's not jagged, it's flattening. Let's see how it is on the palate. This poor wee whiskey. Completely different from my memory. The only thing that is consistent with my memory is that smoke is there. There's still smoke here. It's got that icing sugar sweetness that's almost like new make spirit in a lot of ways. That's the recollection I have about this whiskey. But all the sharp, the elbows and the knees that it had, the jagginess, just gone. It was only ever 42% ABV, but I suspect this is mid-30s now. There's no alcohol strength left in this whatsoever. However, on a redeeming note, it is like sweet, sugary confectionery. It's like sweet lemon sherbet, smoky lemon sherbet. You know the sherbet, the stick that you would lick and stick the, I don't know what you call it where you are, but it was double dip here. It's kind of like that confectionery stick. You got to eat the stick after you'd finished the powder. Sugar, lemon, vanilla, lots of vanilla. Vanilla now. A wee whiff of kind of a, not menthol, but yeah, maybe menthol, that kind of minty. Quite thin, finish quite short, soft. Where the Anok 12-year-old, you could appreciate, despite the low ABV and everything, that there was an elegant, pure, very high quality malt whiskey still in here. And in fact, some new fresh elements exposed by how long it's been in that open bottle. I think what's happened here for our young, shouty, non-age stated Lechik, very inexpensive whiskey back in the day, it's just an old gent now. It's just soft. There are memories of what it once was, but there is no doubt in my mind that this is nothing like I remember. I'm certain this is not whiskey anymore. I'm certain the ABV is so low. But it still tastes like whiskey. It still has redeeming sides to it. I'm not in a hurry to pour another one, which is how it's managed to get there. So what do I do with this? Does it go in? I think it's almost like this has become a thing now. So now that this is sealed, I'm not going to open this again. I'm going to put this with even less in the bottle, and I'm going to put it back on the shelf for another session at some point in the future. It's very endearing, but not because of the liquid, because of my nostalgia, because of my story with it, right? Wow. In summary, whiskies can genuinely spoil. Whiskies can go off. Whiskies can leave us. I think, in my experience tonight, especially with things like that at the Anok, beautiful things, what we have to do is embrace change. And if we are not losing whiskies, if they're not spoiling, and then even if they do spoil, it's like single-digit spoilage that we're experiencing. I would put it to you that what I felt and what I preached, what I was preaching before we did this thing tonight, still stands, and that is that it's nice to embrace the change. It's nice to see how the thing develops, how it goes through the bottle, even when you push it to extremes. Yes, you can lose whiskey. Be careful. But spend much more time worrying about how it's stored and where it's stored. If you have the ability, if you are of the nature or the mindset where you can relax a little bit and be pragmatic, embrace the change and see how things shape up over the years. Before I go into the quiz at the end, let's share some of the things that you shared. Once the bottle is as much air, the low-grade anxiety clock is always ticking in the back of my head, says Jonathan Flowers. If you can't name all your open bottles, then just work on finishing them before opening any more. Interesting philosophy. If he doesn't have in his mind what's open, finish. As long as you love them, says Keith Duncan. A lot of pragmatism from Keith. He doesn't care. Don't stress about it if you're worried. Give a couple of mates a sample, says Craig G. A good way to do it. If it is anxiety that's getting to it and you're getting down at the bottom, this is the big thing. This is one of the things I wanted to be very, very mindful of pointing out. Do not overconsume simply because you're worried about bottles and liquid on the shelf. Because it might only be this much in a bottle and you might think that you're not drinking much. But this much in a bottle can be 20 cl. Don't go polishing off whiskies thinking you're doing yourself a service. You're not doing yourself a service or the whiskey. Try and be a wee bit more relaxed about it. And if you are going to be finishing things off and having heels nights and stuff, make sure you can share it with enough people to take care of it in a healthy way. Sorry to get preachy, but I have to. I haven't noticed any noticeable differences, although I have been told peated whiskies are more affected, says Donald M. I think there's some truth in that, Donald, based on my ever so slight anecdotal experiences tonight. Don't worry, mate. If it's a problem, it'll take care of itself. If it's good whiskey, you'll polish it off. And if it's not, you'll not care if it's not drinkable anymore, says Stefan Novak in Germany. Aye, Stefan, I think there's a lot. And somebody that's as experienced as in him, as he is, in the collection that he has, I suspect that that's pretty wise advice. Not to worry until the fill level is nearer the bottom of the bottle. That was an anonymous quote, but I think that that's something that we have to summarize tonight. I think the less liquid and more space there is, the more you are going to see that change effect. That should just be patently obvious. Which doesn't go bad. Whiskey doesn't go bad. It just changes. Said intoxicated, that he's put it in there as a wee handle. I don't know who that is. This only went out to patrons, so I suspect it's a patron using a synonym. Excuse me. When I have to get a wee bit of burp out, I always mute the mic. I'm always paranoid that I have to double check that it's muted. Anyway, if in doubt, get some of your malt mates round for a curry and then start with the oldest bottles first. Eat, rinse and repeat, says Joe Smith. Curry, I recommend rinsing with a wee beer before you go into the whiskey at the end. There was lots and lots more comments, by the way, but I'll leave with Brian from Whiskey and Court. Interestingly, the universe or my gut usually tells me when it's time to just drink it and say goodbye. Wee bit of pragmatism, right? Okay, it's going to go. We've had our time with this whiskey. We need to move on. I think it's probably would be the intelligent thing to do with this, but if you don't mind, I may just keep this wee dreep until the next time we do this. I'll tell my brother about it as well. What say you all? Eric is saying how blessed we are to have to fret over how many bottles are close to being finished. Absolutely, right? The privilege of it. I am certainly blessed and marvel at my long, delightful whiskey journey. Spot on, Eric. Justin Wan is saying, time for me to sign off. Gutted to miss the quiz, but I'll play on the replay. Slant your barflies. Justin, you're in Hong Kong. Go to bed already, my friend. Nice to have you in here. Simone is saying, yes, that's why I now decant into 100ml bottles, so I don't feel pressured to finish it and risk overconsumption. Spot on, Simone, and I'm glad I was mindful enough to remember that tonight. Richard Hall, embrace the change, my very words in your survey. I think it was, Richard. I did read absolutely everyone's comments. Sorry, I only read out a few tonight. Sevy's in The Alchemist. Whiskey can spoil or go off. Are you talking about Jura and Dalmo or Aquavite? He's given us a wee wink and things like that. We covered quite a spectrum tonight, buddy. I don't know how long you've been in, but it's wonderful to see your name in the chat. I'm a bit spoiled. I get to see Sevy regularly outside of the vPubs and everything, but it's kind of nice to see him where I first ever happened upon The Alchemist all those years ago. Sandro is insane, an excellent vPub. In my case, with approximately 50 bottles open, 2 peated, 2 sherry, 2 bourbon. Oh, sorry. He's saying 6 of them, 2 peated, 2 sherry, and 2 bourbon. And as many have said, I finish them all. Once done, I miss them. It's difficult, isn't it, Sandro? That's when the perma-shelf thing comes in. That's into the replacement bottle thing comes in. That's when to the whiskies that are amplified in our memory with the help of nostalgia. It's a real thing. It's a real dynamic. And Simon Ray saying, I remember visiting Tobermory at the time, and even the staff didn't seem to appreciate Lechic. Distell had a very, very different view, thankfully. Yeah, amen to that, Simon. Absolutely. Amen to that. So I don't know how much we've actually helped or appeased anyone or given advice to anyone. But in summary, even at these extremes, I feel the worst that's going to happen is that the whiskey will change a bit. It might be less enjoyable, but it might be a wee bit more enjoyable. It'll just change. In my experience, and I can count on maybe 1 or 2 hands, but probably 1 hand, how many memorable whiskies I have had that have changed to the point where I don't feel that they're drinkable anymore. Okay, we've got the quiz at the end. There is a wee bit of theme to the quiz at the end tonight, as has been the start of. I'm not suggesting that there's going to be a theme to all the quizzes at the end going forward for 2025, but I'm in the mood to run with it for now. Last week it was Louis Vuitton Moët Hennessy. I don't know if anybody noticed that. I don't know if I pointed it out, but there's also a theme tonight. As the thing goes on and we develop it, I might get to the point where I was doing it with patrons recently, and the theme, if you'd figured out what the theme was, it could have helped you with the harder questions at the end. But that's not the case tonight. If you figure out the theme, it's going to be very, very obvious in the first couple of questions what the theme is. Rick Johnson has bought me a dram with all of those unopened bottles. Here's a donation towards new shelving, Roy. No, here's the thing, Rick. And I want to say this with a big, I'll click the love on that and say thank you very, very much for your donation towards new shelving, because it will be a requirement. 800 bottles. So the people that are here till the end, right? Still over 200 of you in, thank you. 800 bottles. Less than 200 sealed. More than 600, considerably more than 600 open. So when it comes to worrying about the condition of the whiskey, listen, I'm in a very kind of controlled room. Even when I let daylight in here, it's diffused daylight through blinds. Usually most of the time the curtains are closed. They act as a wee bit of a sound deadening, the curtains around this room. There's curtains in this corner and that corner. This is a very good room for it. It's much cooler than the rest of the house. The heating in this room is much cooler. So I'm a wee bit careful about it. I don't want to make out that I just don't care. But in my experience, these whiskies that I have here, I'm not losing sleep over spoiling all of these whiskies, despite the fact that I've got so many on hand. It might yet happen. It's not a recommendation to any of you that you can just not care. But if you're storing upright and if you're storing in a good condition, good environment, and if there is a bit of rotation going on and nothing really goes for years and years without you forgetting, whiskey is going to look after you. And the most it'll do is play with you. Anyway, the quiz at the end. There is a theme tonight. Please stay. Please enjoy it. Please play against each other. How are we doing for time? It's midnight. in the UK, 1 o'clock in the morning in Europe. And it's nice to have you here. There is a wee theme. Everyone, good luck. I'm going to go back to one of the earlier drams I was having and try and remember what it even was. This is the Anok. I mixed this Anok, didn't I? My goodness, so fresh. This is the Anok with a wee bit of the cast strength Anok added in. Perfect thing to sip along with a quiz at the end. 10 questions, all multiple choice. You're only playing against yourself. Lean on the community, lean on the crowd if you're not sure, but be careful of banana skins and the always awkward, deliberately difficult asshat questions. The easy start. Question 1, a tour of which of the following distilleries would feature a still house with 3 stills? Sevi is saying aquavite. Apologies if this has been discussed, but what do you think about parafilming of open bottles? Does it help or is it an urban myth? I think it can only help because what I've talked about tonight is the integrity of the seal. I broke a cork tonight on this Highland Park, for example. On the Lechik that I opened, I could tell that the cork was tight and then it just came out away very easily, and now it feels a wee bit loose. I might need to replace it. A wee bit of parafilm is probably sensible. I don't do it because it's fussy. I really do. Anyway, sorry, I'm not giving you the options here for the 3 stills. A, Glengoyne has 3 stills. B, Auchentoshan has 3 stills. Or C, Springbank has 3 stills. Which of these 3 distilleries, if you were doing a wee tour, you get to the still house, at what point do you see 3 stills? The point at Glengoyne, Auchentoshan, or Springbank? Kyle Taylor is saying for sure C, but also probably others. Graham Fraser thinks B. Dogs of No Uncles says it's C. Lachlan Mackenzie, good to see you. Dogs of No Uncles. Colin and Lachlan Mackenzie, C. Gabriel Welding, David Brave saying C. Jerry Miller saying C. Mikey Hay saying, lots of people saying C. Jero Borkman, that looks like a brand name. Jero, I think Gero, maybe. I know I'm making a mess of your name, but it's nice to have you in here for the quiz at the end, my friend. Savvy the Alchemist is saying C. And Ginger Genius is also saying C. Everyone's saying there are definitely 3 stills at Springbank. Well, we know that Auchentoshan is triple distilled. And we know that Glengoyne is double distilled. But Glengoyne has a wash still and 2 spirit stills. Auchentoshan has an intermediate wash and spirit still, and Springbank, wash and 2 spirit stills. Absolutely. Again, continue with the generosity. Everyone is getting a freebie for the first one tonight. Question 2, now that you've all got 100% so far, 1 out of 1. Springbank's latest 12-year-old cast strength was released in October 2024. But when was the first ever edition released? How long have we been enjoying Springbank's 12-year-old cast strength? A, since the 1960s. B, Springbank 12 cast strength has been around since the 1980s. Or C, Springbank 12-year-old cast strength has been around since the 2010s. Jimmy Legg amongst the first to answer that, along with Kyle Taylor and Boris, both all saying C, along with Danny, Jerry, and Lachlan. Lots of people. This is just clocking up a very fast rate. Mikey Hayes in tonight. Good to see you. Where's Roy? Roy's still in from Norway. Bruce Bernard and Pedro Menezes from Brazil is in. Fantastic. Good to see you, Bruce. Mikey Hay, how are you and the family keeping, buddy? I hope you're doing well. It's been so long, hasn't it? Flirting with the idea, hooking up, would be nice for that to happen. Bob Sander, Gino Camo, Sevi saying C, everybody's saying C. Absolutely, amazingly to me, Springbank 12-year-old cast strength first was released in 2010. Feels like it's been around forever, but we have to remember that 2010 is already 15 years ago. Frightening. Question 3, which Campbelltown distillery's identity was brought back to life by Jane A. Mitchell with a first edition as an 8-year-old back in 2005. So obviously we're not talking specifically about the distillery name, but another distillery's brand that was brought back to life with a very special first edition 8-year-old in 2005? A, that was Riechlachen. B, that was Hazelburn. C, that was Longrow. What was brought back to life? Daisy is here. Good to see you, Daisy, in the Netherlands. Tobias, Jerry Miller, Bob Sander. Almost everybody's saying that Hazelburn was brought back to life. Triple distilled Hazelburn. B, good stuff, says Hoyt. Gero is saying B or C. And Mikey is following the crowd for B. Absolutely the right strategy. Mikey, Hazelburn was brought back to life. It's the most recent of the three brands from Springbank, Hazelburn. It was first released in 2005 as an 8-year-old. There were one or two very special small run releases for special occasions and things, but they actually had something officially called the first release, which came out in 2005. As an 8-year-old, it first started distillation in 1997. Question 4. When and where was William Cadenheads founded and named as such? This looks like a complex question, but you guys are smart. Cadenheads was founded in 1842 in Aberdeen and named Cadenheads in 1859. Or B, Cadenheads was founded in 1825 in Huntly and named Cadenheads in 1842. Or is it C, Cadenheads was founded in 1842 in Campbelltown and named Cadenheads in 1972. Question 4. Questions do get much harder after question 5. Oh, there is a wee split here. Down in Campbelltown, they pronounce it Cadenheads. I wonder what it would originally have been pronounced when it was founded back in its founding year. What I'm basically saying here is, which city was Cadenheads founded in? Aberdeen, Huntly, or Campbelltown, right? That's the only thing there. The years are the years are the years. But the truth is, Cadenheads is originally from Aberdeen. It was founded in 1842, but it was actually not named Cadenheads until William Cadenhead was running it, and he named it under his own name in 1859. But really, the easy thing there was it's an Aberdeen firm originally. And the answer I was looking for was A. Give yourself a point if you answered A as we move into the picture question. We're looking at a picture of the water source for Springbank Distillery. What's its name? What's the name of this loch that we're looking at? A, this is Crosshill Loch. B, this is Campbelltown Loch. Or C, this is Cian Loch Kilkerran. Crosshill Loch, Campbelltown Loch, Cian Loch Kilkerran. Water from heaven, says Mike Molasses. Nice. Pierre is saying C is Campbelltown in Gaelic. Gino is saying A, he's going to follow the crowd. Kyle Taylor is saying, haha, that C deserved a banana skin. Oh, should I have a banana skin for this picture question, Kyle? Lachlan is saying a seawater loch is not a good source. Well, we're not looking at a seawater loch, Lachlan, but I know where you're coming from here. Campbelltown Loch is absolutely a seawater loch. Cian Loch Kilkerran is the Gaelic name for Campbelltown, but what we're actually looking at here is a picture of Crosshill Loch. Is the majority of you are absolutely right. Crosshill Loch is the water source for not only Springbank, but also Glen Scotia and future planned distilleries too. Not all of them. Which of these statements is true about Springbank? I'm going to give you 3 statements. Only one of them is true about Springbank Distillery. A. It was the first Scotch distillery to make organic malt whisky. B. It's unique in that it was never fully closed since its founding year way back in 1828. Or C. It has been under the ownership of the same family from founding until today. Which of those three is a true statement about Springbank? It's going to get trickier from here on in, as it always does. The 5 out of 5s that's been enjoyed so far, plenty of them as well. We've got Hellswood, Kel Taylor, Jerry Miller, Pedro, Where's Roy, Mikey Hay, Dorpass Whisky, Colin, Dogs Have No Uncles. I always say Colin, don't I? I should just say Dogs Have No Uncles. Philip Wagner, Big Ed, Daisy, Jimmy Jazz. Good to see you, Jimmy Jazz, and Falscraft. Gabriel Welding. Good to see you, Gabriel. Ginger Genius John on a 5. Bob Sander, 5. Lachlan McKenzie, Gino Kumo, Graham Young. Graham, Gino, oh my goodness, everyone's in tonight. Mike Molasses, 5. Jimmy Leg is saying not A. Uh-oh. Not C, he's saying uh-oh. Wow. Okay. Let's see how you get on. It was either the first Scotch whisky distillery to make organic malt, never been fully closed since opening in 1828, or been under the same family ownership until today. I'm going to let you lean on your better judgment for this one. B is wrong because in the 1920s, during the Depression, Springbank closed, and it also closed to the point where there was no distillation, no whiskey was made for a certain period in the 1980s in Campbelltown. So it has closed over the years. It has been in the same family ownership right up until Headley Wright passed in 2023. And now it's in the ownership of a trust. But I've left that grey because I don't know at what point in time it passes over ownership into that trust, and you may want to claim a point based on that. It's entirely up to you, as is the rules of the quiz at the end on the vPub. But it was very much the first Scotch malt whisky distillery to make under contract organic single malt whisky, which can still be purchased online today from Deville, a Welsh whisky company, for a very, 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 very pricey amount of money. Question 7. The J and A in J&A Mitchell stands for John and Alexander Mitchell. John and Alexander Mitchell. But what were they? What were John and Alexander Mitchell? Were they A, cousins, B, brothers, or C, father and son? The J&A and J&A Mitchell, owners of Cadenhead, Springbank, Hazelburn, Longrow brands. What does the J&A stand for? John and Alexander. John and Alexander were what? I thought it was Ben Romack, says Jimmy Legg. Now the chimpanzee is winning, says Hoyt. So what Hoyt has done there is he's predicted 10 ABCs for his answers. So it's just the same as kind of throwing it towards the product of chance, as if you were playing alongside a chimpanzee. There's quite a few. Michael Wood famously does it in the comments as well. If you're playing along on the replay, Michael, I hope that you find it easy to score better than the chimpanzee tonight. Okay, everyone, this is going to be a trickier one than I expect. Whiskey with Molly saying C. Dave the Brave also thinks that it's C. Wow. Jimmy Jazz and Dave the Brave is also saying C. I think I've already said Dave the Brave. He's put a capital C in now. Anybody that said C is correct. What a tough quiz tonight. I think it's really tough. There's going to be a lot of attrition tonight. But yes, John and Alexander Mitchell were actually father and son. There is a famous story of the brothers, John being one of the brothers, who had a fallout back in the day and left to go off and for pastures new, which prompted John to bring on his son Alexander. J&A, John and Alexander were father and son. Hellswood has slipped. 6 out of 7. Alchemist is saying, ooh, so it looks like he slipped as well. It's the Colquhoun story. Absolutely. You're right, Ben. Pedro Menezes is saying 6 out of 7. No 10 out of 10 for me today. I wonder if I've kept that Kilkerran question in and just given everyone a spoiler. Jimmy Jazz is on 7 out of 7. Dave the Brave is on a 7 out of 7. So there's still some people with a good chance of a full house tonight. But my goodness, that was a carpet ripping people up out from under people's feet. Can't even speak. Anyway, question 8. The discontinued NAS, non-age stated CV series from Springbank, Longrow and Hazelburn stood for what? So what did the CV and the CV series stand for? Was it A, CV was Roman numerals for 60% ABV because that was equivalent to 105 degrees proof, imperial proof? B, CV stood for chairman's vatting? Or C, CV stood for curriculum vitae? Because it was the story of the life of the whiskey made up of multiple vintages. Mm-hmm. Question 8. Roman numerals for 105 degrees proof, chairman's vatting, or curriculum vitae? Lachlan is saying bet on C. Whiskey with Molly is saying, oh, Sevy. Whereas Whiskey with Molly is saying B, it's chairman's vatting. Jimmy Jazz is saying B. Daisy is saying B, but she's not sure, so she's saying question mark. Looking forward to our first event. Seeing Daisy's name there, I was thinking about Germany, whether I'm going to make Germany this year, whether it's Limburg or whether it's Nuremberg or whether I try something different this year. I need to be careful and look at the family schedule first, but I can't wait to be hanging out with you all wherever we end up this year again. I can tell you that CV stands for, well, it depends on who you ask. The official story is that it's C for curriculum vitae, but depending on who you asked at what point in time, whether it was Frank McCarty, whether it was the staff at the visitor centre, whether it was some of the other team down there, you could get different answers based on their playfulness, based on their honesty and truth. But any of these questions you can take as being correct. There are even many, many more CV potential correct answers. Now, there may be only one actual true correct original answer, but that doesn't matter. Because for us, the enthusiasts and the people that read the stuff on the internet and the thing in the books and everything in between, it all becomes just a product of fun. CV could have been any of these three things and many more things. However, the official line today is that it's curriculum vitae based on the life of the non-age stated whiskies that are in there. Question 9. How did Headley Wright come to own Cadenheads, William Cadenheads or Cadenheads, in 1972? That's when Janie Mitchell took over ownership of the independent bottler Cadenheads. How did it happen? How did it happen? Second from last question, specifically designed not to be easy. A, he acquired the Cadenheads business as part of a chain of retail stores that he took over. B, it came with a closed distillery that he purchased. Or C, he bought it at auction because he really needed a supply of glass bottles. One of these is true, the others are made up. A, he acquired a chain of retail stores and subsequently that meant he owned William Cadenheads. Or B, it came with a closed distillery purchase that he made. Or C, he bought it at auction because he really needed a supply of glass bottles. That Anok that I have rescued, revived, resuscitated, it's a bit of a Frankenstein compared to what it originally was, but my goodness, it was a delicious wee dram. I think the one that has stood out to me most tonight, the one that I've really felt like I want to go back and sip a wee bit more of actually, was the original Anok 12, the antique one. Can't believe how fruity and delicious that still is today. Absolutely every one of you following the general consensus, says Rick Johnson, and the glass was like all broken or something, says Kyle Taylor. You guys are just so knowledgeable. Absolutely. He bought William Cadenhead's because he knew it was a bottling company. And back in the early 70s, when glass was very, very scarce, he bought what was left of the company after a wholesale mismanagement and auctioning off of the entire Cadenhead's everything. I mean, huge whiskey stocks, valuable whiskey stocks, everything was sold. Hedley Wright bought Cadenhead's, the business, wholesale because he heard that there was a huge glass stock. Upon purchase, however, there was no glass. But he made good with the Cadenhead's name, and he built it into what's since become the world's oldest independent bottler, going back to 1842. Okay, how are we doing before we go into this hat at the end? Dave the Brave is still holding it together, along with Jimmy Jazz, Gabriel Welding, Daisy Vleeland. Wow. Wow. It's 3 or 4 of you now, right? On 9 out of 9. Lots of you on 8 out of 9. Graham Fraser is relieved to be on a 9 out of 9 as well. So I think there's about 4, 5, 6 of you potentially looking at Whiskey with Molly. Ben has had a wee banana skin tonight on an 8 out of 9. Ironically, he never got the bottles. That's right, Ben. Such a knowledgeable guy. He's on a 9. I wonder what one has tripped up our Ben tonight. The asset at the end is often the one that does that tripping. This is deliberately designed to be awkward and difficult, and you need to know the answer to 2 different things to get the question right. Until October 2024, how many batches of Springbank's 12-year-old cask strength have been released in total? How many editions? We've already had the answer when it started. We know, I can remind you if you think it helps you, 2010, batch 1 came out. But up until 2024, how many different cask strengths have been released? About the same number as A, the number of operational island Scotch malt distilleries. That's any Scotch malt distilleries that operate on an island, which includes Islay. B, the number of operational Speyside malt distilleries. Should be self-explanatory. Any distillery that's in Speyside. Or C, operational Scotch malt distilleries beginning with the letter S. S for Sierra. S for Springbank. How many batches of the 12-year-old cask strength have been released since it first appeared in 2010? Ass Hattery, thank you to everyone for making it through to question 10 on the vPub tonight. 2 hours 36 in. It's going to be a typical length runtime for the vPub. I'm going to go back to this wee obscurities and curiosities. I've absolutely enjoyed every wee sip I've had tonight. Quite a shock. Maybe with the exception of that Deanston 17 that I poured. That was a wee bit vegetal, and a wee bit odd. But I'm going back to this Glenburgie, 27 years old. Like how, says Sevi the Alchemist. A, says Ben. Lachlan, Joseph. Robert Rutherford. Robert, that's the first time I've welcomed you here, I think. Welcome into the quiz at the end. Thanks for participating. Sevi is going for A, as long with Daisy, Hellswood, Eric Cunliffe, all going A. Has to be A. Others are miles away, says Ben. Okay. Batch. Okay, I won't tell you the answer straight away. I can tell you that the number of island Scotch malt distilleries is in the order of 25, depending on how you want to define them. But it's 24, 25, 26 of that order. Operational Speyside malt distilleries, 49, 50, 51 of that order. Operational Scotch malt distilleries beginning with the letter S is finite. That's currently 8 distilleries. Ben's absolutely spot on. 25, because we are now on batch 26 of Springbank 12-year-old cask strength. So the only right answer tonight was A. If you answered A, give yourself a point. And C, did any of you manage to scrape through for a 10 out of 10? Come on, Graham Fraser has made his 10 out of 10. Congratulations. Kyle is saying happy with that 9 out of 10. Congratulations. So you should be, Kyle. Fantastic. A 9 for along with Wares. Royal Vermeer, Hell's Wood saying happy with that as well. Rick Johnson saying never mind. That's okay, Rick. Falsgraf on a 7. Alan Smith on an 8. Gino on an 8. Peated on a 7. Mikey on a 7. It just jumps. There's so many things coming in now. Gabriel Welding and Desi Vleeland both celebrating a 10 out of 10. You superstars. Fantastic. Along with Graham Fraser for that as well. Did anybody else manage it? Come on, 10 out of 10. Jimmy Jazz with a lucky 8. Gimme. Take it, Jimmy. Absolutely take it to the bank. You deserve it. Superb stuff. And Dave the Brave is also celebrating. I was looking for you there. You're 10 out of 10. Fantastic to you. Well done. The 10 out of 10s from Danny Hebbington. Very generous, very kind of you to congratulate them, Danny. Absolutely spot on. It was a tricky quiz tonight. The most consistent score, Sevi, 8 out of 10, The Alchemist. Sevi, considering you've not been about the vPub for a while, that's a good way to battle your way through and manage to land an 8 at the end, buddy. 9 out of 10 for Mike Molasses. Pedro on a 9 out of 10 as well. Fantastic, Pedro. Robert Rutherford on a 9 out of 10. Look, I'm sure it's not your first quiz, but it's maybe the first time I've mentioned you, buddy, but a 9 out of 10 is fantastic. Shooting. John Ginger Genius on a 9 out of 10. Tobias on a 7. Listen, these scores are fantastic. I thought that was a really, really tough on-theme quiz tonight, but you've proven again that actually it should be you that's stepping behind the bar and hosting the vPub every week and not me. I suspect I would not have scored a 10 out of 10 on that quiz tonight. It's easy for me when I'm making the questions. Something else that's easy for me is to sit here enjoying all these delicious, tasty, interesting whiskies and getting to talk about them. Whiskey continues to fire a passion in me that is ridiculous. It sustains and it's wonderful and I love it. And I suspect that 50% of it comes from the whiskey itself, the liquid and everything that it brings, and 50% comes from you, all of you and everything that you bring, not just to here in the vPub and whiskey, but to each other, the community that we've built. It's fantastic. I'll never ever take it for granted. I hope that you guys don't ever too. Jump into the lounge just quickly before I go, because I see that there's a couple of very generous drams come in from Whiskey with Molly Ben. 29 out of 30 in the last 3 weeks. Bring back Menno. You're suggesting that it's tougher than Menno? You need a perfect score. You've got that winning mentality. Anything short of a out of the park win is unacceptable to you, Ben. Is that what's going on right now in your life? Is that what's happening? Jimmy Legg is saying this was fun. Thanks everyone, Jimmy. It was fun to have you in again as always. To Ben and to my pal Jimmy, both my pals, Ben, Whiskey with Molly and Blair, Jimmy Legg. Thank you very, very much for your generous drams right at the closing moments. Cheers to you both. Falscraft, thank you, Roy, for a very nice vPub that kind of reinforced the stance I had going into it. Well, there must be a reason I like you, wink, wink. Falscraft, I hope I get a chance to hook up with you in 2025, buddy. Thanks for being here. Pedro in Brazil saying, see you next week, Aquavitian Barflies. Those vPubs always are great moments. Thank you, Pedro, the fact that you're tuning in from Brazil. You made it to Glasgow last year and enjoyed it, all the fun as well. So good. How's your brother? Graham Fraser saying, thanks again, Roy, just home from London. Oh, I hope it was a good trip, buddy, and I'm glad you made it into the vPub at the end. Just if not for no other reason, to pick up your habitual 10 out of 10. Congratulations. Donnerpass Whiskey Tim is saying, cheers, everyone. Lachlan McKenzie saying, thanks, Roy, and have a good evening all. Thank you, Lachlan. Thank you, Tim. And Whiskey with Molly saying, Molly's 6th birthday today. Oh, wow. Let's raise a wee glass to Ben's Molly, as in Whiskey with Molly. Happy birthday, Molly. Is there a better Doug than a black lab? Mike Molasses is saying Aquavitian Barflies. Thanks for another great vPub. Eric Cunliffe is saying, thank you, buddy. Another great one. Happy to be here tonight. Misties, it's been brilliant to have you back again, Eric. I hope you had a wee night off, a wee restful night off. All the best to you and Renee. Graham Young is saying, cheers, Barflies. Lovely to be here with you. Cheers, Aquaviti, and have a great week. Cheers to you and Claudette as well, Graham. Fantastic to have you in. And Bob Sander is saying, glad I made it to the end. Super evening as always, and thanks. And Tobias is saying, thanks and good night. Interesting till the end. Finally, Philip Wagner is saying, oh, my tech issues made me miss the last question. Anyway, great V. Take it as a freebie. Just take it as a point, Philip. Great vPub again, Roy Aquavita. Have a great Thompson Brothers tasting. If I could, I would travel to Glasgow again. For every one of you that are going to be there with me on Monday night, I look forward to seeing you in real life, to raising a glass with you with the Thompson Brothers in the Bonaccord in Glasgow on Monday. And until then, well, no, I'll see you on Monday. Until next week, for everyone else, I'll see you right back here behind the bar at the vPub. I can't wait for it. Thank you all for hanging out with me tonight. I'll raise this wee dreep that's left of this lovely 27-year-old Glenburgie and remind you all that you're very dearly loved. I'll see you next week. Barflies. Slanjava.